OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, it's 7:30, it's Thursday morning, and it's another get the scalpel out and try and dissect exactly what happened in a defeat for the Republic of Ireland last night against Ukraine at home. It's not good, folks. Give us your views. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream, or of course you can use the hashtag OTBAM on any of our platforms. Shane Hannon is with us. He was at the game last night. Shane, good morning to you.
Morning, gents. How are things?
Also with us, Colin Buig. Colin, how are you?
Ger Shane, hello.
I mean, it looked like a nice occasion. It's just unfortunate that there were points on offer in a league where winning points actually does have prizes, Shane. But let's talk about the good stuff first. The nice thing that Ireland, that the FAI did for the people of Ukraine who are in Ireland at the moment. There was lots of tickets for Ukrainian children in particular who are fleeing the war. And maybe it seems a bit churlish to be talking about football under the circumstances, but that's our job. So what was the atmosphere like first before we get to the bad?
Yeah, like lovely atmosphere walking to the stadium, it has to be said, lads. Beautiful sun. We were in the kind of that corner of the East Stand where the Havelock Square end is there, where all the away fans were. And yeah, there was a definite vibe that there was a lot of Ukrainian kids there enjoying themselves. Maybe hadn't seen a game of football in quite some time, especially in person. Really, really nice vibe. And the Ukrainian people were clearly there. A bit of a carnival atmosphere, trying to come together as a country, trying to enjoy something, which they haven't, of course, been able to do in recent times. But yeah, just a nice build up to the game, and the couple of boisterous Ukrainian men trying to constantly start a Mexican wave for the duration of the first half, anyway, to some luck. But yeah, lovely atmosphere. Really nice gesture as well by the FAI to give those tickets out free as well to the Ukrainian fans. Certainly contributed to the atmosphere. It was funny, I was sitting with my brother and my sister at the match, and my sister hadn't been to a game at the Aviva Stadium at all. She remembers as a kid going to a couple of the games in the old Lansdowne Road. And like 20 minutes into the match, when the Irish fans first stood up and the whole stand up for the boys in green chant started for the first time, she was like, why haven't Irish fans been chanting until this point? She was kind of taken aback that the atmosphere didn't really kick in until 20-25 minutes in when the Ukrainians kind of came back into the game. So strange atmosphere from an Irish home fans perspective, but lovely to see the smiles on the faces of the Ukrainian fans over in that Havelock Square end.
All right, everything else was pretty terrible, right? Like, is there any redeeming feature here? All the stuff that we thought was good. It's Jason Knight.
Jason Knight was good.
Player of the match.
Nathan Collins was good.
We'll get to
He
him.
played backs.
Well, I liked Nathan Collins' ability to randomly appear in front of the midfielders. I thought this is good. This is going to help with the press. But all of the stuff that we've been talking ourselves into was just not true. Ogbene, not very good last night. Callum Robinson, very streaky, as we know, and he's currently in a bad streak, and so totally unreliable. Josh Cullen, grand.
Yeah.
Jeff Hendrick, that's Jeff Hendrick. That's his level. These games here, not playing football, like we're talking Duffy up as our best attacking threat. Like, head the ball out of the penalty area when the free kick comes in. Queeveen, tell them what to do. You know, like you're a man. You've become a man. We heard this. Like, I don't know. Maybe Bazunu makes the save. Maybe Bazunu's not letting them come back the way they are. Like, but I don't know. Team selection not great. Like, definitely David Connolly was on with us this week saying, you got to start Obafemi. He's scoring loads of goals. What's the point in bringing him on as a sub? He's not really used to it. And then, you know, maybe his introduction is partially to do with an uptick in performance. But also, it's like Ukraine's second team who are defending a goal, got a lead away from home for the last 10 minutes. There's going to be a bit where they sit back and defend. So, like, what did we do to influence the outcome of the game?
Yeah, I'm trying to be as positive as possible. Do you know, it takes me back to the dark old days of the Steve Staunton Raider, the end of the Giovanni Trapattoni era, where you'd have someone like Eamon Dunphy on saying, oh, this is all just useless, why can't we modernise football? And then he'd randomly suggest Stephen Quinn should be in the team, and it was like, why can't we just start playing football? So then Stephen Kenny comes in, and at least he's trying that, and we're trying to modernise and catch up with the rest of the world. But the problem is, we're just an inferior version of modern football now, so we're kind of stuck in no man's land. We had this identity before where we were, you know, a long ball team, backs against the wall job, would get great results, and we've kind of sacrificed that for progressive football, but the problem is we're kind of stuck in no man's land now where we're passing for the sake of passing, not very progressive. It's actually not that enjoyable to watch at the moment. But at the same time, before the Armenia kickoff as recently as last weekend, there
excited.
was quite a lot of confidence. So that's how quickly it's changed.
I think we probably had talked ourselves into a few things that are not true. Callum Robinson is international quality. He probably isn't. Like he's not playing regularly in the championship.
Yeah, but you said he was streaky, which is true. So he goes through runs of decent form. But I mean, if you're saying like he's not good enough, like who is? This is a collection of a lot of championship players.
That's the whole point. This is our level. Actually, it's not our level. Our level is Division 3.
What's the expected level? I mean, what do you expect from this generation of Ireland players? Are we way behind where we should be? I'm not sure. Not sure we are. Are we really that far behind where we actually should be the absolute maximum that we can get to?
Well, we have to be qualified for major tournaments. Like, if we've done it before, we can do it again, surely. I mean, that was the kind of the general atmosphere leaving the pitch last night or leaving the stadium was, like I heard a couple of people talking about the fact that, well, Ukraine are a really solid team. They're really good. But the fact is, like, Ukraine made 10 changes from the Wales game. Their keeper was making his competitive debut. You had their back three, I think, had 3 senior caps between them. Like, this was not, we all know, a full-strength Ukrainian team whatsoever, which puts it into context. And like you mentioned Shane Duffy there, the fact that he's still the main scoring threat, and even from, like, we tried an acrobatic kick towards the end, like it's not just launched balls in from the head, but even listening to Stephen Kenny after the match, and he's talking about he felt like the team maybe weren't, played too many long balls, that the passes in the final third weren't good enough. Change something then. Tell the players to stop launching the ball long. Like, I don't know, is it Anthony Barry's exit that's created this tactical confusion or what? But there has to be a reason for it in some sense, lads. The lack of performances since Anthony Barry's gone is either hugely coincidental or important.
Yeah, alarming.
It's if they are connected, that's not great. Now, the fact that Belgium were winning 6-1 last night against Poland while this was all happening is like, okay, right. It's kind of annoying.
No, it's worrying. I still go into these games like Armenia and Ukraine thinking Ireland will get a result here. And they should be. I mean, like, the majority of that Ukraine team last night played domestically, and they've played such little football this year for obvious reasons. So really, even this collection of Ireland players should have done so much better.
Look,
I mean, like we're a reading in the year's country. We just want our World Cup moment.
You're asking,
that's all we want.
What are our expectations, right? How good was the squad in Euro 2016 that got to Euro 2016, that got out of the group in Euro 2016? Not significantly better than this.
But better.
A bit better, but not significantly better. You wouldn't say it's like, sorry, maybe it's miles better, and maybe like the number of minutes played.
Premier League player,
but he wasn't phenomenal Premier League player.
Phenomenal for Ireland. Top level player. Well, that's the problem at the moment. You can't say either of those.
So he wasn't phenomenal for Ireland either. He had a great tournament, but in the qualifiers, like the midfield was Hendrick, McCarthy, and Brady. James McLean started against France. Darryl Murphy started against France, and Shane Long, who, like, again, as streaky international players go. Now, they were probably playing a bit more football in the Premier League, but the back four was Coleman, Duffy, Keogh, and Stephen Ward, and Darren Randolph in goals. Like, we're not that far away from.
Yeah, Randolph had a great tournament, great match actually, that France game. Somebody scored early, third minute penalty. But even in that tournament, it was, they beat a second string Italy in the last group game. Yeah, but then when Wales came on and crossed it in, and Mrs. Hitter before that, so it's fine margins.
It is fine margins.
The Saturday before kick-off against Armenia, where people thought we're in a good place under Stephen Kenny.
Well, it felt like we were in a good place, but was it a grand national delusion about the quality of the players? Yeah, I think so.
If you look at, like, statistically, if you just look at it, I mean, we haven't won a competitive home game in 3 years, and that was a scratchy win against Gibraltar. 2 wins in 17 competitive matches under Stephen Kenny. You failed to score in half the games, and we actually had as many shots overall and on target as Ukraine. So statistically, if you look at it, if you didn't see the game, you thought, it was quite close. They just nicked it. The scoreline suggests an accurate reflection on the game, whereas if you watched it, it was Ukraine far more comfortable and progressive in possession than Ireland, who ran out of ideas very quickly. And look, one thing you could say, it's June in the Nations League and the players are wrecked, and a lot of the Ireland players aren't playing regularly enough to have any sort of cohesion. But at the same time, there's a certain level that you expect at international football. This is the best that Ireland can offer at the moment. And when you watch it last night, There's no wonder that people are furious overnight and this morning again, probably more so the morning after.
Where's the hope coming from? There's no hope. Abandon hope. Is that it?
No.
Is that it?
No. I spent most of this time trying to be positive.
Well,
and I can imagine people are furious, but why would you even nearly be positive about this team? Just nothing to be positive about.
Well, sorry,
He needs to go and all that.
Look, we are in a scenario where any players who are injured or who are out of form completely ruin the dynamic of the team because it's such a fragile ecosystem. So therefore, not having Andrew Omobamidele, not having Adam Ida means that we don't have really a plan B. We've no target man and we've no ball playing centre back. Now, look, I don't know. Is that enough for us to be completely? The key absentee, obviously, in all of this is Matt Doherty, who is the one player who actually makes the right wing back thing work.
Yeah. And Coleman is missing too. I mean, the only thing with Kenny is he's sticking to his guns in terms of his system. I mean, he made 2 changes last night, and one of them was enforced, right wing back. But I don't know, like Shane, what was the sense you got in the stadium? What was the feeling among the fans around you? Utter frustration.
Yeah, well, it is frustration, but like you described Irish people there as, a nation that kind of a reeling in the ears nation, and that's true. And we're also a nation that loves a scapegoat, maybe rightly so. But and I know the comments on the stream this morning from people listening and watching are going to be largely the Kenny Out Brigade, which and often we're accused of being Kenny FM and the Kenny In Brigade, but. It does some, and look, this is largely me playing devil's advocate here to an extent, but like we can't control games. The decision making in the final third is abysmal. It's toothless at times. Like, at what point does any blame whatsoever come onto these players? I mean, Dan McDonald making the point on Twitter last night that after 10 days together, this team are still devoid of ideas, which is worrying when you put it like that. This team have been working together in camp for the last 10 days. And still, they look like a team that's just been thrown together at the last minute. Of course, you have to give the management team some level of the blame for that. But at what point can you throw on Alan Brown and his first touch is off on a couple of occasions?
Yeah, he was
poor. At what point do the players have to take
Where did he play?
He was poor.
Where was he playing?
I thought he was playing on the right of a 3 and very right, old school Beckham style.
Because when he came on, the co-commentator on the telly was like, "Oh, he's gone right wing back." I'm like, "What? No, that doesn't make any sense. Surely somebody else." So I don't know. I don't know where he played for the rest of the game, but that's not his position, and that doesn't make any sense.
But
when you're chasing the game, one quick question, right? Rotherham, who see Chidozie Ogbeni week in, week out,
plays him there,
play him in the right wing back, and we're like, well, they can't do that. Look what he's done for Ireland. It's like, well, they see him all the time, and maybe that was his position. Maybe this is a time where you try this out. So we don't think Coleman is going to probably through age and injuries for the rest of the next campaign always be available at right wing back. Matt Doherty's had his injury problems. It might get suspended too. What's our third option there? Try him in this.
But he was determined to stay with the system. So if Duffy had scored at the end and it wasn't tipped onto the crossbar, is the narrative slightly different this morning? There's another one out by Ireland. Well, it's still, at least we got something out of the game.
Yeah, but
that's just papers over the cracks. Surely, like Shane Duffy getting another late equaliser is just papering over these cracks. We can't rely on a Duffy equaliser in the 92nd minute off his
and that's where we are with it. But as you look in a few months' time and Stephen Kenny's still in this job, you look back and it's a 1-0 defeat at home to Ukraine, so it's just another negative result. Whereas if it was 1-1, you'd be like, well, there's something there. And that was the problem last night, and it still would have been paper over the cracks. Thing is, as well, in this country, we're a nation of massive football lovers, love our good football, talk about the Premier League all the time. And the problem is it's not in any way replicated in this set of players. And people don't expect them to be world beaters. But what you do like is a bit of innovation. And Jason Knight stood out last night, the start of the game, when he turned his man, played a lovely through ball, Callum Robinson was offside. And it's little moments like that you stick your hat on, like Michael Obafemi, right towards the end of the game, skinned his man. And I was thinking, geez, you see this so rarely from Ireland players. That bit of innovation and that bit of bravery in possession. And it's little nuggets like that you're trying to cling on. But then overall, you just look at a team who pass it sideways and pass it backwards, are quite decent at retaining possession, but you just don't believe in them. That's the worry. You don't believe in them. And Kenny is so determined to stay to this system that we are kind of stuck in no man's land. That's the problem now.
We are chiseling off 2 decades of being told we're no good.
Yeah.
So
and
Kenny's going the other way. Post match yesterday.
Does that system not need changing, lads? You looked at Ukraine last night. Turning to that 5-3-2 out of possession, we were swarmed out of it in midfield. And we knew pre-game, like the build-up, David Connolly last week even saying it, we knew we were going to be swarmed out of it in midfield in advance of kickoff because of our system.
He did pick Knight to help with that, and you could see Nathan Collins pushing forward to try and add extra bodies there. So that they had clearly decided that there were going to be 4 central when we needed to. And like, if you think we should change the system, I'd be interested to hear to what.
Well, this is the thing. Like, it is Stephen Kenny's job, in order to get results. And lads, this is a results-based business, to change the system. And if it needs to be done mid-game, like, this is my worry, that maybe the mid-game decision making by the management team leaves a little to be desired. Because, as you said, Alan Brown coming on, we didn't really know where he was playing. The outlets just weren't there. Obafemi, yes, added a bit of liveliness when he came off the bench, of course. But they just, I don't think the conversation, like, you listen to Stephen Kenny's post-match interviews, and he's talking about the passing being sloppy. He says we didn't pass the ball forward enough. Is enough being said to these players and communicated to these players mid-game? You even mentioned Caoimhín Kelleher there. He is a man now. He needs to step up. He needs to be able to speak and communicate. It's the most important position on the pitch in terms of communication. You probably see a little bit more of it when Gavin Bazunu is in goals, but it starts from the back. And the leadership and communication, I didn't see much communication between those Irish players last night. You go to a Sunday League match with a well-organised team on a weekend, and you will see plenty of communication from the back, and you don't see much of it from this Irish team, and I don't know why.
We're better than Sunday League, right? I think that we should definitely temper that. But I do think, though, that if you're calling for a different system, we need to be able to have discussions about what that might look like. And so I don't really want us to go back to 4-4-2 with gelatinous glute big man up front knocking the ball down for, it'll be Obafemi, let's face it, with Callum Robinson as sub to come on to change things up for the last 15 minutes, with McLean on the left, and I don't know who on the right, and 2 central midfielders. Like, do we have 2? I mean, can Jason Knight play in a 2 in the middle? I don't know. Hendrick can't anymore. Is it Cullen plus Knight? Is that, or is it Malumbi plus Knight in a 4-4-2? And then, I don't know.
Do you bring Ger Shane in there as an almost a holding player with Knight as well? Like, I don't. You almost need to just swarm that midfield, because that's where we seem to get driven out of games.
I do think that 3 at the back, with, if you have Collins, Dar O'Shea and Omamamdeli as those 3, like, that would be interesting into the future, where you've got 3 ball players who can all step forward and can all bring the ball forward. It does remove the Duffy set piece, which,
our biggest threat.
But sometimes maybe you've just got to take a risk.
Well, okay, we're in a results-based business, as Shane was saying, so you get rid of our biggest threat, our centre-half, Shane Duffy, and then we're building for the future. But was that the whole point of Stephen Kenny at the end of Martin O'Neill era, was, can we just go back to can we start again this whole project and at least try to play a bit of football? Like, but now we're getting to a stage where the football's not being played and the results aren't either. Was there an acceptance that the results weren't coming at the start, but at least we were trying to play a bit of football? I thought that was the whole point with Kenny. Like,
yeah, it's true, Colin. But also, like, the concern with me now is, like, we have this game against Scotland on Saturday, and look, we have live commentary of that as well, and off the ball on Saturday, and I'm worried about it.
Oh yeah.
At what point?
Oh yeah.
All the positivity. Where does it go after Saturday if we lose at home to Scotland?
I mean, it's going to be bad. Like, you would hope, though, that there's enough rivalry there to inspire the team and the crowd to get into that in a way that, like somebody made the point, very hard for the crowd to be particularly raucous last night, going, "Oh, screw you, we really hope that you lose this game." It's like, actually, we're really sorry for the shit that's going on in your lives, and this is not really that important tonight. Yeah. It's not quite it wasn't the bear pit of Eva.
No, I noticed that, actually. Yeah, it was quite. Yeah. There wasn't many tackles flying in. Yeah, I noticed that big time. I wonder, is he gone this time next week if there's 2 more defeats to follow?
I think that'd be ridiculous. I think that would be absolutely.
You think it would be ridiculous?
I do.
Do you think it would be ridiculous, Shane?
Like, his contract is through to the end of the Euros qualifying campaign. This is the Nations League.
2024, yeah.
Like, our record in the Nations League has been abysmal under all the managers, and no one ever really got fired because of the Nations League results.
Okay, so are we overreacting?
No, I think Jerry, you're right. Like, I don't think he will be. I don't think he will be sacked. We can still talk about the fact that some people are going to suggest he should be if they lose to Scotland. Like, the target was to win this Nations League group. That's what Stephen Kenny said himself. So if they manage to lose their opening 3 games, clearly they're behind where he thought they were. Like, the Armenia game was say you put the Armenia game down to a freak, and it wasn't. It was just a terrible performance on the night. But then to lose to Ukraine and Scotland wouldn't be a nail in the coffin for Stephen Kenny. He's not going to lose his job. They're going to give him this campaign. But the reality is, this is a 3rd campaign for Stephen Kenny and this management team. So, like, you always give managers excuses in their first campaign. Of course, they need time. Second campaign, you start to say, okay, we want to start seeing some progress here. But in the 3rd campaign, that's when results need to start happening. And look, if they lose to Scotland on Saturday, and I would be concerned for this Irish team on Saturday. I'd like to think the same as yourself, Ger, that they could maybe up it given the little Celtic rivalry there. And
but that's based on hope.
Better.
You know, that is literally based on hope, not evidence. There hasn't been enough evidence of progression in this. Like, we all said, let's judge him now, and the judgment has to start now, and the judgment after these 2 games is going to be pretty harsh, and deservedly so. This is international football. This is big boy pants. And
you know what doesn't help either for people who aren't for Kenny's? We don't get hammered. So at the end of O'Neill, it was obvious the change had to come. Remember the Denmark obliteration afterwards, and Martin O'Neill's trying to stokely say afterwards we were well beaten. Yeah. But these games are kind of close on paper. If you didn't watch one Stephen Kenny game and you're a football fan, you're like seeing how Ireland got on. It was like, oh yeah, they're kind of there and thereabouts all the time. Like, you know, that's the thing with it. Well, I think it's more nuanced than
the other thing is
the actual narrative is in the country, where there's a massive split.
I don't think there's a massive split. I think a lot of people.
There's a huge split.
I think a lot of people, and certainly the match-going fans, have been on Kenny's side the whole way through, and they're desperate for him to succeed. And there's a wellspring of hope that we can play more progressive football, and that we can get this group of journeymen to perform better than the sum of their parts, which is what the alchemy of international management is supposed to be. So you look around the world and you see mediocre teams getting out of their groups at major tournaments because they have a great togetherness, they have a clear identity, and they're doing something that they all believe in. Like, having said that, most of the teams around us who are similar sized all have 1 world-class player or 2 world-class players. Scotland have Andy Robertson, which ultimately wasn't good enough to get them to the World Cup. Wales have Gareth Bale, which was good enough. And Ukraine had Zinchenko, and that wasn't quite good enough, but they're like clearly a better team than us. So we don't have those players at the moment. We nearly did, but we don't. And as a result, we have not very much to hang our hats on.
So these match-going fans, hugely supportive of Kenny. So where are they at the moment? All I'm reading here, all I see, everybody, they want them out. So how is there that much of a split?
Because the people who want him out are the ones who were going to text in this morning. The people who are going to defend him are like,
this is the time to defend him.
Well, what's
then
your
have
argument?
To come back in.
What's your argument, though?
Well, what we've been talking about for like 23 minutes.
It's difficult.
It's actually, I think it's way more.
And how do you have conviction around that argument when we got beaten by Armenia and we just got beaten at home by Ukraine?
So
it's hard.
Where would we go now? So you sack Stephen Kenny hypothetically in the next week because there's 2 more negative results to follow in the next 7 days. Okay, so what would the plan be then? And people will say, it doesn't matter what the plan is, you just have to get rid of this. Is it really that disastrous at the moment?
No, it's not.
And it's not down to one man that it's a disaster.
No, it really isn't. And we can talk about the fact that the domestic league has been considered the problem child by the parent organisation, and that it doesn't get investment from the national broadcaster at a level that we spend more money in the Champions League than we do as taxpayers to watch it than we do on the League of Ireland. All of that feeds into the fact that the national team isn't where it should be, right? But specifically, his job is to get us out of this group, or to qualify for the next tournament. And there's an opportunity which is now over from the Nations League. It's more likely that we're going to be relegated than we're going to win this group now, you would have to say. For the next manager coming in, being in the 3rd tier and qualifying from that would actually be more likely. But I mean, would you back us against North Macedonia at the moment? Probably not. Or Georgia.
Lads, I think that's the point at which, like, it's all well and good saying, some people calling for Stephen Kenny's head if they lose to Scotland. I think if they're relegated from this League of Nations group, given the fact that the ambition was to get promoted, to start getting regular home games against the top tier teams, which of course is going to bring in a lot of money, if then you're talking about playing teams below this current level that we're at, that's when it's a disaster. Like I was in Slattery's pub near the Aviva last night after the match, chatting to a couple of random Irish fans, and a couple of them were Kenny in still to this point. But as you said, they're finding it very difficult to come up with an argument at which to keep him, because if you lose to the likes of Luxembourg and Armenia, it's tough to concoct an argument. You can say keep patient, you can say give the manager time, but the reality is it is a results-based business. Stephen knows that himself. As I said, it's a third campaign. To hear Stephen even after the match talking about the Ukrainian goal
the Slovenia game as I mean, it's not really a third campaign. It's the first full campaign properly.
Yeah. To be fair to Stephen, look, but at the same time, he's had 20, 25 or 6 games.
Look, he's not inexperienced anymore. He really is. There's no all of the bits. We did say judge him on this, and the evidence is not good. That's the problem. Like, this was supposed to be an opportunity for us to spend time together, catapult the team forward, be brave, look good, and we don't look good, and we're not being brave. It's the opposite of what we wanted to happen is happening, and you can't dress that up. So, but sacking him as opposed to trying to get through this and giving him the opportunity to solve the problem that he has, that's nonsensical. That would be nonsensical to sack the manager now for an organisation that, let's face it, at the moment is still not a shining beacon of how to run a sports organisation. Where's the sponsor for the men's senior international team? Like, what's going on with that? The director of football, apparently the appointment is ready to be announced and a deal has been done, but we're just still, for whatever reason, it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
You know, there's the FAI have enough on their plate at the moment. They've somehow managed to screw up what's going on at Dalymount. We still don't know what's going to happen with that. Like, what? So, is football in Ireland?
Well, they're not too busy to get rid of him if they wanted to get rid of him.
Is it ready for a distraction of, like, we need a new manager at the senior international team? I'm not sure.
Look, this lack of sponsor, like, that's more pressure on Kenny again. So you're hardly going to attract an on-the-fence sponsor from last night's showing.
I mean, it's not his job to get the sponsorship. That's the chief executive and the commercial director, and that crowd.
The commercial director will go, but look at the team on the pitch. So what brand is going to get behind that?
I mean, you know, it's still a really interesting collection of young Irish men who are out there representing us, and it's like, you know, I don't know. Right. Il Postino 88, terrible indictment of Irish football is that we simply cannot do anything positive with the ball when we have it. 2 main questions: is there any real progression? And 2, what's the point in continuing with these tactics if there's no results? Do you think it's still, you know, too soon to announce everything is a failure? Like, it's just, sport is tricky. Yeah. We're in the middle of a really bad run at the moment, and maybe it starts to turn around, but we need to start turning around pretty quickly. We need to see something. The first 10 minutes, right? First 10 minutes, you're like, oh, we're doing something here. We're doing something. Look, it looks great. Yeah. Sign him up, fella.
Yeah, look, if you watched the first 10 minutes last night and then just looked at the results of Kenny's time, you'd be like, yeah, they're not bad. They're in a decent shape.
Can I ask, at what stage do we have to start looking at Kenny? Asks Paddy Vaughan. Had a free pass. I haven't seen the progress in style. If any previous managers had his current record, they will be slaughtered. Well, he has been slaughtered. There's been a campaign against him from about 5 matches in to get rid of him from a bunch of hacks. Like, there just has been, and there's been constant people from the very second he got the job saying he wasn't good enough. So you're not paying attention if you're saying he hasn't been slaughtered. He has been slaughtered by loads of people, but he also managed to rally people behind him because there was an uptick and there was hope and there was promise, but those players are not delivering at the moment on the promise. Right, I'm going to play some Jason Knight here. He was they need to change it to make it the Ireland player of the match when they're announcing it. Ireland's player of the match is, as opposed to the player of the match is, because we all know that that's not the case. Now, it used to be, the excuse used to be that sponsors only wanted to have an Irish player, but the sponsor isn't there at the moment. So,
no,
don't know what the crack is. So let's listen. Jason Knight in conversation.
Jason, how frustrating a night was that?
Yeah, frustrating, disappointing for the result. I think there were some positives in the game, but first and foremost, the result is what we wanted, and we didn't get it tonight.
The first 15 minutes, you really led the charge, and Ireland flew out of the blocks, and it felt as though a goal was inevitable, and it just sort of fall away very quickly. Can you put your finger on what changed from how Ireland were playing after 15 minutes to how they were playing after half an hour?
No, not really. Look, you have your good moments in games and your bad moments. Look, Ukraine are a good team as well, so they're going to have their moments. But I think, like I said, when we're on top, we need to sort of get that first goal and that first goal is vital, especially in international football. That first goal is vital, and we've been on the receiving end of that the last couple of games as well. So it's not nice.
They made a lot of changes, but they still had a lot of experience, particularly in the middle of midfield. How did you find it in terms of trying to get on the ball and trying to really influence the game?
I think I had a good amount of ball. I think I can demand more from myself going forward still. I need to get more goals and assists. I had a couple of chances that I should have took, but look, that's football, and I'll try and do better. It's
an unfortunate record that Ireland have in the Nations League in terms of still waiting for a first win, but also just 2 goals, and it felt as though goals were starting to come easier over the last year. What's gone on over the last couple of games that not a huge amount of chances have been created, with the exception of maybe the last sort of 10-12 minutes of matches?
I don't know. Look, we've had a good 12 months or 18 months, and this couple of games shouldn't define us, but we need to go and react on Saturday and get a good result and get a good performance with that as well.
Stephen had stated that the aim was to win the Nations League group to get promotion and all the benefits that go with that. It's a very different scenario that's in play now. You're probably looking at avoiding relegation and looking at it in a different way. Have you spoken about that and what you want to get from the next 2 games?
No, we haven't spoken about it. Look, we're just looking forward now. We need to go into Saturday with full confidence and full of energy and try and get a really good result, especially at home.
What about confidence when you think back to coming into the squad last week, where it was with those positive results to where it was, and we just left the dressing room there? Has it been affected?
No, look, I think there's still confidence in the group. We've had a couple of knockbacks in the last week or so, but we're still a confident group. We've still got some very, very good players, and we're going to go into Saturday raring to go and try and get a good reaction.
You know, when defeats come, there'll be questions about every part of the setup. In terms of the players' belief in what Stephen is trying to do, what would you say about that?
No, it's still fully behind the manager. I don't think that can be questioned. The gaffer and the staff have been great with us, especially us young lads coming through. They've given us a chance, and I don't think that can be questioned. Look, we're just looking forward to Saturday and trying to put it right.
Yeah, Jess Knight's going to be in the Ireland team, I'd say, forever from now on. Like, if he's fit.
Forever. I mean, we'd say that about Callum Robinson a couple of months ago.
Well,
say that about Ogbene's goal scoring form, that we finally had a goal scoring striker.
Well,
it changes, you know.
I don't know. I think that
he played very well though. He's a cut above.
He is a cut above, and certainly he'd be in the team. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Will O'Callaghan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose this was the worry when the Kenny referendum was happening, lads, at the tail end of 2020 and into 2021, where there were some people who felt that, you know, no matter what happened results-wise, this was about a longer-term project, and therefore Stephen Kenny had to be around for the European qualifiers to try and get into the tournament in 2024. And there was almost a feeling among some people that a blank cheque was required, and that we almost had to put the short term of results to one side. And now we've seen 2 games back-to-back where we've gone backwards at a rate of knots by comparison to the way that the Republic of Ireland were playing, particularly at the tail end of the qualifying campaign. The performance at home against Portugal, even the friendly against Belgium, where there was plenty of hope, and the way that the attack seemed to be coming together with Ogbene and Robinson back for the games against Azerbaijan and against Qatar, there were plenty of reasons to be optimistic. But now, unfortunately, the Republic of Ireland have gone back to the type of form that we saw in the kind of opening dozen games of Stephen Kenny's tenure, and the results, like, when you put it down, as simple as it is, 6 defeats and 6 draws in Nations League games and just the 2 goals scored, probably tells its own story. And the most frustrating thing, I think, about this window was the fact that everything aligned quite nicely with Ukraine and Scotland's qualifying fixtures for the World Cup being pushed back. It meant that both teams were going to be in a position where they had hugely emotionally and physically demanding games around the Republic of Ireland fixtures. And we saw effectively Ukraine's B team last night, a series of under 21 players who only had a handful of caps playing at the Aviva Stadium, 10 changes from their defeat against Wales last weekend. Scotland are probably going to make changes as well. I don't know whether it's going to be a bit of a mix and match maybe from them for this Saturday at the Aviva Stadium. And then you mix in the Armenia game, where whatever about maybe winning the game, we would have been expected not to lose away from home against Armenia. The feeling was that this was set up to try and get the Nations League campaign underway with at least, I would think, 2 wins out of the 3 fixtures. That has not happened, and that heaps the pressure on. As you guys have said, really it's now about looking over the shoulder about relegation from the Nations League, as opposed to at the outset where Stephen Kenny was talking about being competitive and potentially even getting promoted to League A. I think that was always a little bit too optimistic, and obviously a manager is going to come out and say that at the outset.
Is he though? Izzy, I actually think that was a misstep. That was a big misstep. It was like, oh, we can win that group. It's like, just talk about everything is building towards the Euros campaign. That's what the plan is, as opposed to trying to win this group, because we haven't won a game in this division. We didn't get relegated on technicality from this division. Ideally, we'd be in one division lower than this and playing against a standard that is closer to our standard at the moment. And I think that was a mistake, to be honest. And they might have retracted that.
I think even League C will be difficult right now, though.
I agree.
Based on the performance in the first two games. We struggled against both Bulgaria and Finland last time round too. To play against teams around about that level, was looking even at just the fixtures from during the week, and I was thinking the Republic of Ireland will probably struggle to win games in this group currently. And there is that feeling that this could be a real damn squib. If there's a poor result against Scotland on Saturday, it'll really then be a case of trying to dig in later this year to make sure that they stay in Group B. And look, there was the very juicy thing at the end of Group B. If potentially the Republic of Ireland had done well, it could have led to a potential playoff for the European Championships in 2024.
More than likely,
it would have been a very nice safety net based on the fact that a lot of teams in this group are probably going to qualify through the traditional route. So that seems to be up in smoke after two games.
Like I actually disagree with that, what you said there, Ger. Like, why wouldn't he speak of ambitions to win? Like, he's almost saying,
because it makes a rod for your back, and it means that everybody in the comments is like, oh, you told us we were going to win this and now you haven't won it. Who are you? Who are you anyway? That's what happens.
He's not saying it for the benefit of the fans. I feel like Stephen Kenny was saying that for the benefit of the players, making them believe, the players aren't stupid. They're reading his comments in the papers or whatever in the media. If they see their manager saying, yeah, of course we can go on and win this league, this UEFA Nations League group, the players might start to believe it. He might not have thought when he was saying it that they actually would go on to win the group, but it might just instill a little bit of confidence and faith and ambition.
But it's a high wire act. It's a high wire act, and surely that comes from the work that's done on the training ground, and that comes from the man management skills that we hear are so good, and that comes from their internal motivation. That comes from Seamus Coleman, and that comes from the kids infusing the team with confidence and energy. Like, I get the point you're making. I just think it's far less relevant in international football than it is now. Having said that, when Trapattoni was telling everybody these players really, I'm cutting my cloth, that must have had I don't know if that had a negative impact or not, because that was like, he was talking to Robbie Keane and Damien Duff, and Shay Given, and like Champions League players who have been told they weren't good enough. Maybe they responded to that with a screw you, we're going to show you. Yeah. This has turned out, I think, to be and the reason I'm talking about it, Shane, is because it's a common theme coming through in the comments. Very quickly, some comments, because 7 minutes past 8. Il Pacino 88 says, if you want Kenny out, then name a replacement. Paul Mallon says, I think they should have gone for Chris Coleman when they could have.
It's not the Chris that usually comes up, Jared. It's usually Chris Hughton that people talk about. He had his advisor role with Ghana through the recent African Cup of Nations. But I saw Chris Hughton tweets again at the weekend, despite the fact that Nottingham Forest had an incredible change in fortunes after Hughton left the club last year. Yeah, he seems to be the name that comes up every time. It was Mick McCarthy before that, obviously. Genuinely,
what's the plan? Like a 3-4-3 with two attacking centre midfielders, a false nine that doesn't drop back, wingers bombing it into the box with no target. James McCullough asks, is Kenny falling into the same trap as McCarthy and previous Ireland managers by staying loyal to out-of-form players? He's definitely staying loyal to players who aren't playing international football.
That's a very good point, by the way, on both that, I think, on the system too, which is that the idea of going to three at the back and deploying the two wing-backs was almost primarily to try and get the best out of Enda Stevens and Matt Doherty. Enda Stevens has obviously had a very difficult campaign because of the injuries that he had at Sheffield United. He's out of form currently. I don't think he played particularly well over the last two games. I'd expect James McLean to probably start against Scotland at the weekend. And at right wing back, the Republic of Ireland have really missed Matt Doherty for these last few fixtures. And again, Matt Doherty appeared to be coming into form before he got his injury for Tottenham. I don't know if Seamus Coleman is the right player to play right wing back, and even last night his leadership seemed to be missed on the pitch, just even trying to drive the team forward when the game got a bit static. But the idea was to try and get Coleman in at right centre back. Now it would appear that Nathan Collins fits very well into that position, but the Republic of Ireland don't really have great options at right wing back because it's very early for Festi. I thought Cyrus Christie was very conservative with his use of the ball last night, and as a result we're not getting the most out of the wing backs, which was the whole idea of going three at the back in the first place.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have minded seeing Chidozig Benny playing there last night, just to see what happens when he plays there at international level. Perhaps that's his best position, we don't know. But Ger, we are no good, says Powell 74. I mean, there's certainly a view out there. That's people are kind of saying that, and like, how do we get good? Just be good. Just tell
that's
the
the problem.
You and you be good, okay? You do whatever it is you need to do to be good, and we'll be grand. And it'll
Lads,
look good.
a load of that is out of Stephen Kenny's control too. Like, remember how well Jamie McGrath had been playing? And like we all spoke about how excellent he was, particularly away from home against Portugal. Then he gets a move where he had been going well in Scotland, goes to Wigan, can't get a game. And then really you can't include McGrath in the squad because he's getting no first team football.
Well,
he can't control the likes of
Hendrick,
injuries, and Callum Robinson got out of form.
He picks Hendrick when he's not playing football, do you know? And he picks Duffy when he's not playing football. So why is it a different standard for Jamie McGrath? I understand that they have a 50 whatever number of caps, and so I do get it. It's just that it's sometimes it seems like it's different rules for different players. And
Well, we know why he picks Duffy. Duffy's the biggest threat. But isn't it just as well that Doherty and Coleman didn't play last night? If that result was still to happen, because then we'd have nothing to hang our hats on.
Well, it's just
at least we have that.
Myler was really interesting yesterday when he said, like, I would do whatever it was. The be all and end all for me was playing for Ireland. If he dropped Duffy, would Duffy force a move? If he dropped Hendrick, would Hendrick force another move to a club where he's going to play football week in, week out? I don't know. Do you know?
Hank wants to get in that too.
Yeah, what do you think, Hank?
He's having a good shake. I don't think Ricky likes the idea of Shane Duffy having to force a move.
What's Kenny not
Look,
trying
at different stages of the season, like Callum Robinson was in good form for West Brom at different stages of the season, then didn't finish the season particularly well. And when Callum Robinson was playing well for his club, he was playing really well for the Republic of Ireland. Like, we remember how well he played, particularly in those fixtures against Qatar and Azerbaijan, where Ireland actually took the ball in the front foot. Problem is, I think for the last two games, the Republic of Ireland carried very little threat. I mean, realistically, outside of Robinson hitting the ball into the side netting in Yerevan, and the Shane Duffy chances, say, when the ball was crossed in, he went for the most audacious of efforts over his head. The Republic of Ireland created very little outside of set pieces and crosses outside of that. In general play, the Republic of Ireland created nothing in
it's true.
Over 2 hours of football.
It's true. I mean, that is the history of us watching football. With the exception of the Roy Keane era, in particular that qualifying campaign, when I'd say we scored almost every chance we created. So we weren't creating a million chances. And we did have Robbie Keane and Damien Duff in the side in their pomp. So look, it's not. It's our curse to watch football where there are no chances created for us, and we're living a constant Groundhog Day at the moment. Like, what happens if the penalty gets given? Is everything completely different? The team
I was saying
infused with confidence.
And Duffy scores the winner with the header. Are we still saying, well, we're not playing well? The football's terrible. The system's no good. Not getting the best of our players, and the results are actually masking what's happening. But then at the same time, people say it's a results business.
Yeah, I think
it's very hard to please everybody here. Like the problem is that we're doing. The problem is we're doing seemingly neither at the moment.
You match going fan. With your expectations.
By the way, Kenny's saying he wanted him in the group. It's no bad thing. He's trying to rebalance the post-traumatic stress of the Trapattoni era. Where
there's a way to do it without making it off your back. So that
that's hindsight. That's your hindsight talking.
We said it at the time. We said it at the time 100%.
Did you
go back and watch
If we went back though and
you would say, I'm not sure about this. That's making it off your back because everybody's going to come for you. Lo and behold, as night follows day,
that's not what they're coming for.
Keyboard warriors are coming. He said we're going to win the group and then we're going to get relegated. What's going on? I'm telling you. Noel Cal says Nations League are basically friendlies anyway.
That's the spirit.
Kenny's trying to bring a bunch of green kids through to international football, says Fergus Keogh. Let him at it, because Big Sam will just pick 11 28-year-old English rejects and play 6 to back to grind out 1-0s. Do you know what?
Yeah, and will we be happy then? Because then we're gone to the major tournaments.
I was just about to ask.
Reeling in the ears.
Is that who we are? English cast-off rejects grinding out 1-0s. Is that actually what you want to be? Is that when you were a kid in the back garden you were dreaming of being, like Kevin Davis-esque? Is that what you wanted? Maybe it is. Right. Well, we didn't even get to talk about the hurling pod. I presume it was good this week.
Yeah, it was pretty saucy based on the weekend just gone by, because we had a Munster hurling final for the ages, probably the best one in modern memory, at least, between Clare and Limerick, which has really kind of whet the appetite for the idea of a potential trilogy if this was to be an All-Ireland final between Clare and Limerick. And I think, based on the evidence of the 2 provincial finals from last weekend, there's a very good chance that they'll meet again. Clare have not been beaten in 70 minutes in the 3 meetings so far this year with Limerick, which has to give them an awful lot of hope. And on the flip side, Limerick have just become their first team since the 1930s to go 4 in a row. and they've achieved it without Keane Lynch being available since a few minutes into the second game of the round robin. So Limerick maybe even have more improvement. Seamus Flanagan is back and 100% fit and absolutely firing last weekend. We had a kind of a superstar performance from Tony Kelly for Clare, which bodes well, I think, for both teams. Clare run aside the draw, which I think they'll feel they can qualify from an All-Ireland final from. They've got effectively what we would call the Leinster side of the draw. They'll most likely play Wexford if Wexford overcome the Joe McDonagh beaten finalist Kerry away from home this weekend in the quarter-final next week, and then it will be Kilkenny in the semi-final, which is a good route for Clare.
Okay, we know all that. What I haven't heard is the spice between the two lads, because basically the instruction from Scahill last week was go easy on me, horse. Did he go easy on him, or did he batter him?
No, I think
Paul Murphy's a nice man. He's a nice man. He's a good man. Sometimes
maybe a bit too nice this time.
Well, I mean, he left all the dark arts were on the field, it turns out.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think the fact that Galway were so poor in the game itself meant that...
he patronised him. Is that? It's like, I don't respect you enough to go at you now. I'm going to be nice to you. Was it that?
I think there was a certain amount of Kilkenny cute tourism as well, where Paul was incredibly quietly confident last week about Kilkenny. So we were talking about how well Galway had done. Galway had done nothing wrong. Kilkenny were so poor against Wexford. Their use of the ball was poor. They were reverting back to type, and it was long ball, and it wasn't working out. And all the matchups seemed to be set up in a way that Galway were going to win. Yeah. And Paul just had that feeling. It's like Kilkenny will adapt. Brian will find a way. And there you are, 22 Leinster titles now for Brian Cody as player and coach, 74 for Kilkenny. It's unmatched dominance in any province for a single championship. And Kilkenny have done 3 in a row. Quietly, they may have done it, but they were very, very impressive at the weekend. So as a result, Paul Murphy was just kind of smug as a Cheshire cat.
The cat that got the cream.
Can someone tell me what was said in the handshake? Does anybody know?
I don't think it was the handshake, Colin. I don't think the issue was the handshake. I think the issue was that Henry Shefflin had to do all of the effort to get across Brian Cody.
So well, get over yourself a bit too. Like, there's a bit of get over yourself for that, you know?
What I saw...
Come on.
I saw was Shefflin go over and say, oh, well done. Better team won. And he expected something similar in retort, and then I think Cody was like, thanks.
Yeah,
and smiled at him.
That's it.
And why Shefflin made such a huge deal of shaking his head and walking by, because he knew the camera was going to go to him. Yeah. I want to know what was said.
There's a way of doing things, lads, and it's the winning manager goes over and seeks the
they meet in the middle. They meet in the middle.
Well, see, they didn't meet in the middle either, because Henry Shefflin went around, shook hands with the Kilkenny backroom team.
No. Shefflin stood there.
Stood there with his coach and staff.
Stood there for ages, waiting. So there's a pair of them in at will, and it's been very one-sided. I think poor Cody, for the first time in my life, I feel a little bit of sympathy for the most successful man that there's ever been in the game.
Cody was looking for anyone to shake their hands. He was like Hank, like he was going around in circles at one point just to avoid Shefflin in any way.
It is
box
classic
office stuff.
It is absolute box office stuff.
Brian Cody did the alpha thing as well, lads. He left his feet effectively planted when Henry Shefflin was going over to him, and that's the reason I think that Henry Shefflin was shaking his head.
There wasn't even a 90-10.
Win the game.
There wasn't even a 90-10. There wasn't even a 90-10.
Come on, win the game. 100. Your job is to win the game. You can't be giving out about the handshake afterwards.
One of the things that was and what was said, it was the fact that there was no actions taken by Cody. It was the nothingness of it all. But I've never seen such a deliberate shake of a head.
Oh,
when
totally.
He knew the camera was going to be on him.
I hope they nurse this grievance a lot over the winter, and next year we get it, and it's even better. Please let everybody stay in situ. Please, whatever happens, let Cody be there next year, let Shefflin be there next year, and it's going to be the greatest thing that we've ever seen.
The camera operators knew what was said. Well, and I haven't heard what was said. And maybe Will is right. I just want to know what was said.
I saw somebody giving out. Was it Hector was giving out about, let's see the scenes of the celebrating players? No, we've seen them all celebrating a gazillion times.
That's
it's Kilkenny. Don't cut away from it. Whatever you do, don't cut away from it. Anyway, we're way over time. 18 minutes past 8. We've got to take a quick break. We're back talking Formula 1 next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the ball's the best, number one.
It's the GOAT of sports apps.
Talk about the greatest of all time. Nathan, you know Big Joe. Big Joe's the greatest of all time. He's the GOAT. We know it.
So
every single time. Yes.
It's tough going. It's tough for my ego. I'm going to say I'm the Djokovic of this scenario.
I love it.
This is OTB Sports Radio. Download the OTB Sports app now.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong. Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. And if you sign up today, you'll get 1 week on GoDating.ie absolutely free. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB Sports Radio.
We've got a panel who know a thing or two about being trailblazers.
All right, sport was already kind of impeded upon.
Sinead Kassan.
There's an innate interest in it anyway.
Dermot Lang, it didn't blow me away with him.
Jason Sherlock and Kieran Donaghy with us.
Basketball would have been my main game.
Retro panel for you now.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Retro Panel. Wednesdays and Thursdays from 4.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
20 minutes past 8 here. You're very welcome back to OTB AM. If you've missed anything, we've been talking about the Republic of Ireland. We'll talk about it again a little bit later on with Dion Fanning. And, you can give us some considered views as opposed to just the first thing that comes to your mind, like some people have been doing in our YouTube. And I'm only joking. Get it off your chest. That's what we're here for. A little bit of mourning after the Republic of Ireland's defeat last night. Now, to move to something entirely different, I'm delighted to say Jess McFadyen is with us to talk to us about the Formula 1 Carnival as it continues on. Jess, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Hi, very well. You caught me just before I'm actually...
So, apologies. Shane, you far away there?
He's lost his earphones, Jess, so we can't hear you, but I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, hi.
Jess, good morning. I suppose we needed to bookend Monaco and look ahead to Baku this morning, but the talk is Sergio Perez. Everyone is talking about Sergio Perez. It was all Max Verstappen, and now all of a sudden Red Bull.
Wow, the Gremlins are with us this morning. He was going to ask about Sergio Perez there, Jess. Tell us about what's going on with him at the moment and why this bubbling up has happened.
Yeah, I mean, the past two races for Sergio Perez can't have really been any more different. Monaco, he's coming off the back of a win, which is amazing. It's going to have pumped him full of confidence and actually put him way up there in the title fight for this year, up there with Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. And we're going into a track that he has had a lot of success in. He's got one win there, but he's also appeared on the podium quite a number of times as well. He's probably... when it comes down to it, one of the most successful drivers around Baku, actually, which when you look at podium finishes and where he's come, it's a race that delivers a lot of unexpected results. So I think he's going to be going into this weekend feeling pretty good about his chances, and I guess has put to bed a few of the rumours and rumblings that Red Bull weren't going to let him win. Whether or not I'm ready to put that to bed yet, we'll have to see how Baku plays out, because I think Red Bull are really going to want to use the momentum that they've got so far to make sure that Ferrari can't come anywhere close to them. Charles is obviously still leading the championship as we go into Baku, but Red Bull do feel like they've got the momentum and they've got two race-winning drivers this year.
It's funny because Christian Horner, rewarded Perez with a new contract, but even before that, they agreed, I think, before that Monaco win last weekend, Jess. But when you look at the title race now, like you mentioned, Charles Leclerc at the top of it at the minute, but you can't rule out Verstappen. It's hard to rule out Perez, and even Carlos Sainz is there. Like, is this? I'm touching wood as I say this because more in hope than anything else. But are we looking at a 3 or 4 horse race in the Formula One Drivers' Championship?
It would be nice, wouldn't it? It would definitely be good going into the last stage of the season with a bit more of a kind of 2012-esque situation where anyone could win it. Whether or not we're going to get there, I'm not sure. There's a lot at stake, and when there's a lot at stake, the teams tend to kind of double down on their prize horse, really. So whether or not we are allowed to get into much of the season where we'll see it get closer, I'm not too sure. But based on kind of knowing the two teams, Red Bull is Max Verstappen's team, and I think Ferrari, Carlos Sainz has had a kind of rocky start. He had a good finish, obviously, in Monaco with his P2 finish, which is great, but he's still yet to produce race-winning results. So we'll have to see. It's still early doors, right? I don't want to kind of put any doom and gloom or negativity on the season too early, but we're starting to get into that period where summer break's not too far away. Ferrari have had positions where they've made mistakes and they've thrown away a lot of points. So they're going to want to double down on how do we win this championship. And so we might see more of that whole like team orders situation playing out. And I do think that if you're looking at the two teams, Charles Leclerc is Ferrari's boy and Max Verstappen is definitely Red Bull's.
Like when you look at race strategy, Jess, that is something that kind of comes to the fore, because a lot of people, who maybe are bit part Formula One fans will look at a team like Red Bull and say, oh, this is great for Red Bull. They've got two drivers competing in Verstappen and Perez, but that brings with it complications as well in terms of race strategy. If you've two drivers very close in 1 and 2 towards the end of a race, and the driver in second looks to be gaining on the leader, there are decisions to be made there from a race strategy perspective. I don't know what did you make of the comments from Max's father, Jos Verstappen, in the wake of Max's third place finish in Monaco. I mean, clearly, pointedly criticising and critiquing the Red Bull team strategy. Obviously, he's going to be out there and bat for his son, but quite extraordinary for Jos to be critiquing his son's team and the strategy like that.
Are we surprised? I don't know. I mean, it's
Maybe
kind
not.
of. I wasn't surprised. I mean, I was surprised that maybe they made it so public, and how eloquently he wrote the complaint to Red Bull. I mean, that's not to take anything from Jos. He's a very intelligent man, obviously, but it was odd in terms of, like you say, you kind of we don't have any time for internal squabblings. Like, this season is as hot as last season, and teams can't afford any internal squabblings. But we know how pushy the Verstappens are. There's a reason why Max Verstappen has been number one driver there and has had the struggles of who their teammate is. It's very, very much politically, it's very skewed towards the Verstappens. So maybe that's just a reminder, a little warning shot from Jos there to say, look, this is all well and good, but you're backing my boy. And I think that's kind of where that was coming from. Whether or not Red Bull will take that to heart, we'll have to see. I mean, you hope that there's not going to be any major political moves. It's a strategy game, right? Formula One. You need to put your pawns where you're going to bring home the highest level result you can. And actually having a really good number two is so important for these teams. It can be the difference between winning or losing both championships. So they're going to want a strong driver in Sergio Perez to support Max Verstappen if that's their kind of positioning. So it is important to keep Sergio motivated, because if he becomes demotivated this early in the season, then you're going to start suffering, because 1 versus 2, when it comes to kind of charging out at the front, can mean a much trickier race, even if you have the fastest car, the fastest package for that circuit. Not having backup, not having a wingman. I've just gone to see the new Top Gun film, so I've probably got that in my head. But not having a wingman makes you vulnerable. So you need to have that balance. It is a team sport, even if the individuals are the ones that tend to shine.
Give us a quick review of the movie there. Any good?
Loved it. Really, really enjoyed it. I mean, it was proper throwback nostalgia stuff, but I came out with a big smile on my face, so I would definitely encourage people to go see it.
The tiger parenting of the Verstappens is just a little interesting tangent if we could get into it for a second here.
Sure.
He's still very young, like he's still only 24, so there's 2 decades or like 15 more years of him being at the top of Formula One if he wants it, right? Like, that was obviously always the plan when they decided that they were going to turn their son into the machine that he is.
100%. I mean, I don't envy sons or daughters of Formula One drivers. I think that must be quite a tricky place to be. I mean, you've got Mick Schumacher, who has had something very similar, and the world puts a different kind of magnifying glass over you when you have a name that went before you. It's kind of quite daunting. Obviously, Max is already quite successful, and he's young, and he's got plenty of seasons in front of him. So, yeah, I think it was always the game plan, I think. And Max had such a roller coaster career in terms of his trajectory has been incredible. It's been exponential. He jumped from Formula 3 to Formula 1, which is just still unheard of, to make that jump from such a junior series into Formula 1. And there was a lot of criticism about that at the time. Is he ready? Clearly he was. And he's got the results. But yeah, I don't think maybe I would be tough enough to have that kind of pressure, which is why I'm sat here talking about it rather than racing cars. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, because it's one that I've also compared to Lewis Hamilton's upbringing, Jos Verstappen and Anthony Hamilton probably couldn't have two more different paternal styles. Anthony is very encouraging and more kind of tactile in his approach. He's very you get that kind of emotional feeling, and you see that in Lewis's style and his approach. He can be quite an emotional feeling driver, whereas Max is cold and calculated, as is Jos. So you get those kinds of mirroring. You can see that impact on their driving style, which is, I'm sure there should be studies on it in terms of like how that, what is the better kind of route. I mean, you've got the Richard Williams and the Williams sisters is kind of a very similar kind of maybe a something to follow there as well. But yeah, it can't be easy being Max Verstappen, but he's had a lot of success based on it.
Was his dad any good as a driver? Because he didn't have a lot of success, but that doesn't necessarily mean he might just not have been in good cars. Was he considered? I don't remember him being kind of talked about as somebody who was being done out of a good car, but maybe he was a brilliant driver, just never got the opportunities.
He definitely had his moments. It was obviously a completely different era of racing when Jos was racing. But yeah, I think again, like, so much of being a Formula One driver and your successes is so much of it is talent, yes, but so much of it is luck in terms of what team you end up racing for, how competitive they end up being, and also who else are you driving against? Because it's the same thing that was talked about with Valtteri Bottas. Being Lewis Hamilton's teammate kind of makes you pale into insignificance in comparison to the stellar driver and record holder that Lewis Hamilton is. So, had Lewis Hamilton never come in, would we be talking about Valtteri Bottas as an amazing driver? It's so much of it is to do with luck and who you end up getting pipped against. And Jos's era was also a very competitive era. So yeah, I think to be a Formula One driver, full stop, you have to be an incredible driver. So I think that's, as much as we look at drivers' performances and it's our jobs to critique or to make comment on them, the 20 drivers that we've got on the grid, they still have to have their absolute skill for driving an F1 car in the first place. So yeah, I think people would never say that he was an unsuccessful driver, but compared to Max's championship winning season and his absolute ream of podium finishes, race wins, he's actually now, thanks to Monaco, he's now equal on Red Bull's most successful driver. And when you think that Sebastian Vettel was a 4-time champion with Red Bull and Max has already equaled him on success, and he's still got so much to go, that kind of shows you about where Max is, really.
Jess, if we touch focus or move focus over to Mercedes just for the moment, and I'm looking ahead to Baku and this street circuit at the weekend, and Mercedes traditionally, I guess, in this year have maybe struggled around the slow corners, and it's a track that they might potentially struggle at. But start of the year when George Russell came on board with Mercedes, you're thinking, right, this is a proper rival for Lewis Hamilton. This is someone who's going to push him on to more world titles, and really it hasn't quite yet materialized in that fashion. Like Russell, I think, is the only driver on the grid to have achieved points in every race. He's probably the most consistent. He's been 3rd, 4th, 5th thereabouts in every race. Mm-hmm. Is Russell's consistency highlighting a per Lewis Hamilton this season, or how do you see it?
How funny, a year ago, Lewis and Max were fighting for the championship, and this year we're already kind of writing off Lewis Hamilton. I don't buy it for 1 second. I don't think it changes that much. We can't discount Lewis Hamilton from anything, I don't think. I think what we're seeing, and this still needs to be confirmed by Mercedes, but from what we've heard and what I think, and this could be completely wrong, so don't hold me to it, this is not verified, but I would not be surprised if Mercedes was using Lewis Hamilton's experience and skill to run a more experimental setup. We've seen already in races they have been running different setups on those two cars, and I think what Mercedes is probably doing is using Lewis Hamilton to get to the bottom of their issues, because they have big issues, and letting George find his confidence and just focus on racing. So when we're looking at points, yes, there's a massive discrepancy now between George and Lewis, but I think that is a tactical approach from Mercedes in order to get to the bottom of their issues with their current setup. It's a very experimental philosophy that they've gone with the cars today. I mean, obviously, when we saw that they had no side pods, everyone was like, what the hell is going on? Like, why? How have you brought a F1 car with no side pods? And obviously, they've been suffering the most probably with the porpoising effect of the bouncing. And that has obviously led to them not really having clean weekends and kind of not competing at the front like we're used to seeing them. But I think George is a phenomenal racer. I think he's shown that. And so it's not to discount his consistency, as you say, top 5 finishes in every race, only driver to do that. It's very impressive. But I don't think we can all of a sudden say Lewis has lost it. That's just unfair. And just, it doesn't happen like that. Like, you don't all of a sudden overnight lose your ability or lose your kind of 7-time world champion. That doesn't just disappear overnight. But a lot of it is down to the machinery in Formula One. We know that. So yeah, I think it's the scoreboard isn't reflecting what is going on in terms of the skills of those drivers. I think there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, and the other teams have already said that they're quite worried about Mercedes making a comeback. They are Mercedes. They know what they're doing. So I think as soon as they tie it all together, we'll see both drivers racing for podium finishes, if not wins.
Can I just pick up on something you said there, Jess, and attach it to another driver? Like, you don't lose your talent overnight. Like, if we just touch on Daniel Ricciardo as someone who, with McLaren, hasn't quite reached the heights expected of him. I know he's been kind of under the shadow in some regards of Lando Norris, but I almost think of writer's block as, you know, Ricciardo is a driver we know that has the talent. He's just at the minute struggling to get it out there on the page. Like, is he someone who, if he doesn't buck up quick, I know is it 4 races now in a row without points for him? We know he's a marketable driver. We've all seen, the interviews with him and the character that he brings to the sport. But if he doesn't buck up with McLaren this season, can you see him moving to someone else next season? I look at a team like maybe, if, say, for example, Sebastian Vettel was to hypothetically leave Aston Martin, that might be a nice fit for Daniel Ricciardo. Do you see Ricciardo as someone whose time at McLaren is running out? And if so, where could you see him heading next season, hypothetically speaking?
That's the $1 million question, really, or multi-million-dollar question, depending on what kind of a deal he can get. But he's running out of options massively. And the biggest thing for Daniel that he's always said is that as much as there's criticism being thrown at him and his ability, his criticism is also with, well, come on, guys, I'm a good driver. He's a race winner. He was extremely successful with Red Bull. It was, again, that whole dichotomy of Red Bull becoming Max Verstappen's team that made him want to leave. And so then he had to find other teams to join, and he had to kind of put his money on a midfield team that was going to improve. And if you were going to do that, then he obviously went to Renault, now Alpine, in his first switch, which was a massive shock to everybody. I still remember the announcement coming out and being like, what on earth is going on here? But it's because he was hoping that Renault, being a manufacturer, would invest enough to bring a competitive car, and that kind of never really materialized. So then he took his chances and moved to McLaren. Again, I would say that was a smart move. But as we kind of touched on with Lewis, in Formula One, you have to have that perfect balance of car and driver in order to get the results that you need. And as we've seen, when you are comparing teammates, some drivers take to their cars a lot easier than others. And if you are the lead driver, the team tends to build the car around that driver, or will push for setups and that will suit that driving style. And so if you don't have that driving style and you haven't got the ability to adapt your driving style to the car, your results are going to suffer. But it's a balance, right? It is a team sport. It's not star drivers just going out there and showing off. There's so many people behind the scenes that have to make Formula One work. And I think, to your question, where is he going to go? There aren't really many more places he can. And I think he will definitely not want to be at a team that is, chasing a singular point. That's not what he wants, and that's not where he sees himself. But there are only 20 seats on the grid, and as you say, like when you're not pulling in the performances, when you're not showing, you lick the stamp and send it movements that we know Ricciardo for, your market value dips. So will the team want Ricciardo? It's actually quite a scary thing to think that he might come to the end of his tenure. I really hope that that's not the case. I hope that either McLaren give him a little more time. He's meant to have a contract for next year with McLaren. But for the first time, just before Monaco, we had Zach Brown coming out and saying, there are clauses to his contract that work for him and some that don't, in terms of there needs to be performance clauses that mean if you don't bring the results, then we can terminate this contract early. I don't see McLaren doing that. They don't really have anybody waiting in the wings to bring in. The one pawn that I'm really interested to know where they're going to go next year is Pierre Gasly. Because with Sergio Perez signing his contract and him being a Red Bull driver, he's kind of stuck at AlphaTauri. So I don't know how many more seasons he's going to want to do that. He's going to be sniffing around and wanting other places. Maybe McLaren would be somewhere that he would look to. We're just going to have to see. But yeah, Ricciardo is a massive question mark this year.
All right, Jess, we'll leave it there and we'll come back to those question marks at some point in the near future. Great to have you with us again. Thanks a million. It was brilliant.
Thanks.
That's Jess McFadyen there giving us her thoughts on Baku this week, and obviously the Game of Thrones, the constant chess moves that are going on in the background of Formula 1. 8:41. Cathal Maloney's with us. Cathal, good morning to you.
Hey lads, how's it going?
Very well. Not really. Bit of a black pall over the show this morning, as you might guess.
Yeah. Do you know what? I detect a different kind of reaction to last night's match, just in terms of the stuff towards Stephen Kenny and some of his post-match stuff as well. That just, I'm not sure. I think we need a result over the next two games. I think I shudder to think what's going to happen if we lose the next two matches in pretty bad fashion. I think we could be in a difficult spot next week. Yeah, a different range of many different outcomes are possible over the next while if things go completely pear-shaped. Yeah. You just wonder, would they consider a change if, obviously with the qualification campaign coming up and 4 games in this window, if the manner of the losses continue in a similar manner to the first 2 matches in terms of performance and the inability to really dominate in the way that Stephen Kenny wants to dominate the matches, and in terms of chances created, I just wonder, will the decision makers look at that and think, is there a better way here, more pragmatic way of playing, that we could get some results in the European qualifying campaign?
More pragmatic kind of way. That's really going to sell the tickets, isn't it? It's going to make you get up off your seat and go. And like, I don't really want to watch the Republic of Ireland play the way we did under Mick McCarthy or the end of the O'Neill era again. Like, what who's going to bring something there? Saying Big Mick again, is it? What's the alternative?
Is the staying power there to persist with this method?
I think you've no choice at this stage. Like, they've committed to him, they've given him a contract through to the end of the qualifying campaign. We should give him the opportunity in a qualifying campaign where it's legitimately a competitive international. Like, by saying that he wanted to win this, he definitely invested a lot more in the outcome of these than was necessary. We've already had this conversation, but not to retread that, but so they were competitive, and that is his best team, and that's the team that he wants to represent us. And the performances have been really abject, back-to-back abject performances. So all of a sudden that Scotland game
becomes important, doesn't it?
Oh, it's massive. Like, if they get hammered, it's a disaster. And you would have to say these last 2 games are actually the hardest 2 games of this sequence. You thought that maybe Armenia away and perhaps a Ukraine side who've just crashed out of the World Cup at home, that was going to represent our best opportunity here.
I was reading there, I was hoping, Cathal, you'd come in and be our beacon of positivity, because I'm just reading through the YouTube comments here, and like, it's, and look, I know, Jerry, you mentioned like a lot of the people who are going to be commenting online anyway are going to be those people calling for Kenny's head, but it's such an area of negativity online in terms of Stephen Kenny, in terms of this Irish team. But we need little moments of positivity. Like, you look at the under 21 performances, of late. You look at Will Smallbone and players like that who are undoubtedly going to be in the senior panel coming through. It's not all terrible. It's as long as we're not losing games, as Cahill, you mentioned, if we lose in a particular fashion to Scotland or North Macedonia, if we lose 3 or 4-0, then questions undoubtedly are coming over Stephen Kenny's tenure. But I think we need to have some level of positivity with this Irish team, because it's not all terrible. There's good players coming through.
The only thing I'd say about that, right, is that the next generation are always going to be the generation that saves us, because it was going to be Troy Parrott who saved us, and we all got carried away in the hype.
And Aaron Connolly as well, of course.
And Aaron Connolly, and the problem is these players are not performing at the right level, at club level, to have an impact at international level. Like Troy Parrott hasn't made it in the Premier League. He didn't make it in the Championship. He went down another division and started to show signs there, and he's still very young, so I'm not in any way writing him off. But Connolly, for example, didn't make it in the Premier League and has struggled in the Championship, and probably, who knows what next season will hold. Maybe there's a bit of maturity coming to him, and maybe he's found the right club situation for him, and the level of improvement that we saw towards the end of the season will be sustained over a period of time, and then he comes back into the team and all of a sudden he's good, and Adam Ida is fit again, and away we go. But the notion that Will Smallbone is now the new Wes Hurling is going to save us, maybe it's true, but can't get in the Southampton team, rooted to the bench there, is that so we're hanging our hat on.
He's young.
Exactly, and so therefore has yet to let us down.
But we've been there before with the under-21s, in that when Stephen Kenny was over the under-21s, and they had a promising campaign, and I think he thought as well maybe that they would come through a little bit quicker than they have done, and the transition to senior football might be a little bit smoother than it has been. So it's dangerous to hang your hat on the under-21s progress, but they have done brilliantly, and there is a lot of bright sparks there, but they need to have something to aspire to too at senior level. And I think with the squad that's there and the template that Stephen Kenny has, there's undoubted potential, but we need to start getting results pretty quickly. I mean, you need to find a way to beat the likes of Armenia while developing this style of play. I don't think it's acceptable to be losing to teams like that and write it off against we're trying to develop a new style of play and a new system of playing.
We do also need to recognise the fact that our pretense at being a team who automatically qualifies for tournaments, even the bloated Euros, is nonsensical at this stage. We are not a first world footballing country. The chronic decades of underinvestment are coming home to roost. We've been talking about this on this show for 20 years, literally, that the game has not been run properly. It's not being run properly. We're starting to see some signs of the impact of good youth teams and proper coaching, and I actually think that the League of Ireland is making significant strides, but it needs a massive injection of cash, and it needs a massive injection of coaching and resources and facilities, and that's not coming. It's not coming. So I don't know. It's a moment of crisis that we either need to hold firm in, or blow everything up and hope that somehow miraculously a Messiah rides to our rescue, which only really happens in the movies.
Well, that's the thing.
I'm not the Messiah.
When you see names mentioned, I'm seeing names mentioned here in the comments, people like Steve Bruce, people like Roy Hodgson, that is depressing. Seeing things like that mentioned, you don't want to, as you said.
That's called trolling, Shane.
Well, I know they're trolling, but you mentioned the decades of underinvestment. If we're to go back to something like that, one person says, I will not renew my season ticket if the likes of Lennon, Houghton or similar comes in. I'm not going back to watching caveman football similar to what we've seen under Martin, Trapper, Mick. Look at their qualifying results. I think a lot of season ticket holders do understand that this is a process, but processes also reach their end, and really you have to, while giving Stephen Kenny time, you also have to realise, as I have said a million times in the show this morning, it is a result.
We're going to dial you back up there, Shane. There's just a little bit of a problem with your line. It's 8:48. Is there anything else going on?
Aside from the Republic of Ireland, well, the under-21s, speaking of the under-21s, they could be assured of a European Championship playoff place by tonight. Italy take on Sweden in their qualifying group this evening, and if the Swedes fail to win, Ireland will be guaranteed second place at their final group game next week against the Italians. There's some positivity there from a Republic of Ireland point of view. Here at home this evening in the Women's National League, one game at Dublin Derby, DLR Waves can move level on points with fourth place Peamount. That's if they win at home to Bohemians. Kick-off for that game is at 7:45. A big day ahead in the world of golf. The controversial Saudi-backed LIV Golf Series gets underway in the UK later. Phil Mickelson among the names in action at the Centurion Club near London, where there's a prize pot of £16 million in the individual competition. Graham McDowell also teeing it up. Dustin Johnson as well among the 48 players in the field.
And Bryson's obviously signing up.
Yeah, and Patrick Reed as well, and Ricky Fowler supposed to be on the way. So I think it has been,
with the exception of Ricky Fowler, I would have said good riddance to bad rubbish.
Yeah, I think to be fair, if you stand back and look at it, LIV Golf have done brilliantly with the players that they've got on board. Consider Rory McIlroy said it was dead in the water at one stage a couple of months ago. From that point to here now, it's kind of remarkable how they've got it together. And the press conferences yesterday, I mean, they're worth watching back in full if you can on YouTube. I mean, it's just the most bizarre stuff. And
if anybody didn't see it, there was a brilliant line of questioning about, particularly to Westwood and Poulter, you know, if Vladimir Putin held a golf tournament, would you play there? And they're like, oh, my media training didn't tell me how to answer this question.
Yeah.
What am I going to... And the brain is slowly worrying. The hamster is like panting and panting as the wheel turns and turns. And they're like, that's a hypothetical?
Yeah.
I can't answer that. Would you have played in apartheid South Africa? It's like, just the answer is just no. That's different, you know?
Yeah.
Like, those they're different scenarios. I wouldn't have, absolutely. I'm appalled that you would suggest that I would have played in apartheid South Africa, even though loads of the golfers did. Loads of Irish rugby players went over and played. Loads of Irish musicians went over and played. You can Google that list of people. So, anyway.
Yeah, I thought Phil Mickelson's press conference, he looked terribly uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. And
he sleeps on his bed of money.
His 200 million. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of the fan response to this tournament this week, the online coverage of it and the viewership of it. It's going to be very interesting to see what the initial response is, and I suppose the quality of the golf that's played as well is going to be interesting to see.
I think this is all going to be very interesting. Like, what if nobody cares? What if nobody wants to watch a bunch of rich people getting rich playing 54 holes for meaningless stuff? Like, golf has tried to do a lot of things in the past that everybody's like, no, I'm not really into that. I'm into the stuff that's always been there, that has a little bit of tradition and a little history. Like, But it's totally meaningless is exactly the word, and you mentioned it there. It means absolutely nothing to the winner this week if they win, but they do get a cheque for $4 million. But like, what weight does that title carry? Very, very little. Whereas if McIlroy was to defend the Canadian Open successfully, I would wager that definitely means a lot more to him. Well, he'll have world ranking points. There's still some ways that they can screw this up. There's also ways that this can ruin golf. Like, the whole thing just collapses and everybody goes, it's such a precarious position. That was all a bit of a pyramid scheme, golf, wasn't it? Wasn't it all a bit of a... Yeah. Wasn't it all just a little bit of a pyramid scheme? Yeah, it's a really precarious position, and it's going to be very interesting. There was talk that the tours wouldn't come out with their various punishments until the guys tee off in London today. So 2:00 start, there's a shotgun start for that tournament. So keep your eyes peeled at 2 p.m. to see what happens. All right. But yeah, as I mentioned, the Canadian Open is on as well. Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry in the field for that across the water, and Ulster Joe Jonathan Caldwell and Olivia Mahaffey are both involved in the Scandinavian mixed event that's in Halmstad today, and racing today at Leopardstown. The first goes to post there at 5:15 this evening. Good stuff. Thanks a million for that. It is 8:52. If you want to get involved this morning, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, and OTB AM is live each morning, brought to you by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We could have done with some effortless finishing from the Republic of Ireland last night. Unfortunately, it was not to be. Jonathan Wilson, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Eamon Dunphy is writing in the Star today that he was basically crying watching England and the impact that Rice and Grealish had, and what might have been for the Republic of Ireland. So we're kind of doing a bit of living vicariously through the English football team at the moment in this piece. It turns out Jack Grealish is he's good at international football anyway.
He's good at coming off a bench in certain games in international football. I think that's probably a fair way of putting it. I still think, and it's sort of a sort of diluted version of the issues he's had at City, that Southgate demands those wide forwards fulfil their defensive responsibilities. There's quite clear roles for them in blocking the opposition fullbacks, and I think still a doubt remains for him on how good Grealish is at doing that. And I think that interview Grealish gave on the pitch after the final day of the season when City had won the title, which was one of the more extraordinary interviews I've seen, Well, he basically admitted that and said, he's really trying, but he finds it difficult. And now he's finding he's second guessing himself. And so the thing that made him great at Villa and that made him so effective against Germany on Tuesday night was that he's worried about taking a player on because he's worried about losing the ball, and he knows that will annoy Guardiola and to a lesser extent Southgate. So I think, given the depth of talent England have in those positions, and that probably, to be honest, doesn't include Jared Bowen, who also made an impact off a bench on Tuesday, I would suggest his role for England is probably as an impact sub when England need to break the pattern of the game, and his dribbling ability clearly is a great asset in doing that.
So he's a plan B in case of emergency break glass.
Well, I think it's because that suggests you'd only a plan B suggests he's not part of, well, by definition he's not part of plan A. I think he's a subsidiary part of plan A.
Okay.
He's the part of plan A you come to after sort of 60-65 minutes when opposing defences are tired, when the shape of the game has formed, and if you want to break that shape, if it's useful to you to break that shape, he's a great asset to have. And I don't think that is. I think we have a sort of hangover from the days even before substitutes or before two substitutes, when a specialised substitute role was seen as sort of almost demeaning to a player. But actually, I think now we need to be a bit smarter than that. We need to say a game is 90 minutes or perhaps 120 minutes long, and you're allowed 5 substitutes. And that means you've got 16 players you can deploy at various times. And it may be that the best value of this particular player is not to start the game, but is after an hour or in a certain circumstance. And that specialised role, I don't think there should be any shame in that. I mean, a sort of slightly more sort of pedestrian example of that was when West Brom had Shane Long and Lukaku. And often Long would start with run the legs off a defence, Lukaku would come on, and Lukaku would score because the defence was knackered, or the other way around. I get that players still want to start games, want to play as many minutes as possible, but I think when you have a squad with the depth of an England squad or a modern elite squad, I don't think there should be any shame in those specialised roles.
The 5 substitutes is really the game changer in that aspect, though, because there's been instances before where a player like Grealish is on the bench, somebody gets sent off or injured early, and suddenly one of the subs options is gone, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and then he doesn't get off the bench. You're like, hang on a second, that could have changed the game for you. But now with 5 subs, you're always going to have room to make that substitute, and you can promise somebody in advance, look, you're going to have 35 minutes here, make sure you're paying attention to what's going on, keep an eye out for anything, and you'll be ready to go after the hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course there's the flip side of that, which is the impact on the player who starts, because particularly those wide areas where you have to track the opposing fullbacks, and you can say to those wide players, just chase them, just run. If you're knackered after 55 minutes, that doesn't matter, because we got Jack Grealish can come on, or Bukayo Saka can come on, or whoever. Look at the bench. We've got lots of players who can play in your position. So run yourself out. Destroy that fullback as much as you can in the first hour. And when you're knackered, you can come off. And they're unlikely to want to use one of those substitutes to replace a fullback. And therefore, we've got a tired fullback against one of our lads who's fresh. And I think given England have that, we've sort of almost become the way the narrative's gone in England recently has been, it's always, it's such a shame we've got this depth in wide areas that, why couldn't we have another centre back, or why couldn't we have a slightly more reliable keeper, or why couldn't we have a backup to Harry Kane? And all of that is true, but it is a strength. So I think using it and saying, right, one of these players is going to play for an hour and he's going to run himself silly and he's going to destroy the fullback by doing that, and then we bring on somebody else. That is a strength, and we should embrace that and use the strength we have.
Jonathan, we know the attacking talent that you've mentioned that this England team and Gareth Southgate are blessed with, but that formation that we saw working to such great effect in the Euros, that 3-5-2 that led them all the way to the final, seems to now be, from watching them the other night, be in favour of this more attacking 4-2-3-1. Obviously, Southgate has the problem of trying to cram in as many of these attacking players as he possibly can. But do you think that could be to the detriment of the team ultimately, that they're almost leaving behind the system that led them to such great success in the Euros?
Yeah, I mean, I think the formation in Germany was pretty experimental, and I'd be surprised if he tries against Italy, but I'd be surprised if that's a long-term plan. I think what we've seen over the past sort of year, 18 months, and certainly at the Euros, is if Southgate thinks England will dominate possession, he'll play a 4-3-3, and that allows him to get in one more attacking player. If he thinks there's going to be a contest for possession or that England aren't going to be able to dominate it, he plays the back three, whether that's a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3. He seems to like, even when it's a 3-4-3, it tends to be Sterling playing almost off Kane. Now, Sterling hasn't played the last 2 games, so the Hungary game, the Germany game, I mean, slightly different anyway. So I was simultaneously surprised that he played with the back 3 against Hungary, because that's a game where I think you would expect to dominate possession, and I think that was possibly conditioned by how poor the performance was against Hungary at Wembley in the Nations League last year. Was it a Nations League? Was that a qualifier? No, it was a qualifier. Sorry, in the qualifier last year. And then I was surprised he went with the back 4 against Germany. I thought it would always be a back 3 against a team of Germany's quality. And I think one of the reasons England got passed around as much as they were in that first sort of hour or so was that they didn't have the extra man at the back. And I think to an extent that was Southgate proving to himself and maybe some of his critics that we're not good enough to play a back 4 against a team of Germany's quality. And the fact that he was then able to change the game and in a positive way so that England could have nicked it at the end. I mean, it would have been a smash and grab, but they could have nicked it at the end. I think the biggest criticism you could have of Southgate has been his in-game management. The Croatia semi-final, when the Croatian wing-backs pushed forward and England started to be overmanned in midfield, and Jordan Henderson was sort of running shuttles across the pitch, chasing the ball hopelessly. And then the final of the Euros against Italy, when beginning that second half, you could feel momentum shift, and Southgate didn't really react to that until the crucial goal had been conceded. Well, here was an instance of him in a game changing things and it working, and England getting back into it.
Most countries kind of look on fairly jealously, Jonathan, particularly at the English, how stacked it is at right back. And you see the other night, I mean, you think of the likes of Reece James and Trent Alexander-Arnold, who you would expect would get into most international teams across the world. And then you see another right back in Kieran Trippier being adopted at left back. Like, are you surprised to see someone like Kyle Walker still operating at right back? He's probably more used to being that right-sided centre half himself of late. But with all the depth of talent they have in that position, is there any surprise among English fans, media, that Kyle Walker is still the man being preferred there?
I don't think so. I mean, the great thing that Walker gives you, all 4 are excellent right backs. So in a sense, it doesn't really matter which of the 4 it is. Trippier is used on the left because with Chilwell being injured or just coming back from injury, there isn't an equivalent figure on the left. So in that sense, Trippier takes care of himself. Walker's pace is such an asset, and if you think back to the Germany game at the Euros, there's a couple of occasions when Walker's pace got England out of jail, and that allows them to be slightly more aggressive. And they're still not that aggressive, but slightly more aggressive in the press and playing a slightly higher line, because Walker's pace and Pickford's aptitude in leaving his line mean that they can afford to leave a little bit more space there. So, yeah, he's playing for Manchester City. He's playing for the league champions. He's a very, very good right back. But it's his pace that maybe just sets him above the others in Southgate's mind. I think there's clearly the 4th choice now is Alexander-Arnold. And performance against Hungary was pretty poor. And I think that's not really an issue with him so much as that the way he plays for Liverpool, you need a very high press because he will leave space behind him. And that's not a criticism. He should leave space behind because he's so good going forward. He's so good at linking with Mohamed Salah. What was it, 12 assists in the Premier League last season? His crossing is exceptional. So you want him to be using those parts of his game. But for him to do that, there will be space behind him. Now, you'd think in a wing-back system that should work, because you now have a right-side centre-back, possibly Kyle Walker, covering behind him. And that's something I'd quite like to see England try, although not a huge amount of time now before the World Cup to try that. But if it's a back 4, England just don't press as hard. They don't press as high. And what that means is that opposing midfielders have time to measure a pass into that space. So the great example of this is when Liverpool lost to Real Madrid in the Champions League last season, when they lost 3-1 in Madrid. And the first 2 goals both came from Toni Kroos not being pressed, because Liverpool's press last season was all over the place at that stage. Not being pressed, being able to measure those passes in behind Alexander-Arnold, and he then couldn't get back. And so Alexander-Arnold, his way of playing at Liverpool works because of the rest of the Liverpool system. The way England play is very different to that. And in international football, you don't have the time to generate that sophistication of press that you have at Liverpool. So England can't really play like that. So England, almost by definition, as an international team, they can't get the best out of Alexander-Arnold. Although, as I say, possibly there would be an opportunity at right wing back, but that's not the system he's used to playing, and that would take adaptation. That would take time.
They've really got to try that, though, right? Because he's so spectacularly good. I mean, there's a world in which he might not even make the squad, is there, for the World Cup?
I think there's definitely a world which doesn't make the squad. I mean, do they have to try it? I think Reece James defensively is better, and that's not to do with positioning. That's to do with just in one-on-one duels. I think Reece James is a better player. He's not quite as good on the ball, but he's not. He's a good crosser. I think you saw with Chelsea last season when he was injured, a lot of that supply down the right disappeared. So. I mean, you can argue which is the better all-round player, Alexander-Arnold or Reece James, but I think you can certainly make the case that Reece James is the better all-round defensive player who can also get forward. So, I mean, you can play Reece James on the right side of three centre-backs as well. There's that option, which again speaks of England's strength. But I'd like to see it tried, I guess, is what I'm saying. But I don't. I'm also uneasy about this idea that just because a player plays really well at club level, that means he has to be in the national squad. Now, for a long time for England, that was the case because England didn't have enough players. But England are in this very, very happy position at the minute where they probably have 40 or 50 players who would be totally reasonable members of a World Cup squad. And when that's the case, I think we've got to get beyond this idea of handing out international caps like there were sort of Blue Peter badges or something, a reward for playing well. It's not. It's so you've got the team, you've got the squad, and then you've got to think of it like a club manager. If I go out and bring in this player who I don't have to pay any money for, which is obviously the difference, but is he going to make the squad better? What is he going to do in that squad that's going to improve the overall performance of the team and the overall balance of the squad? And if a player's not going to do that, if he's going to complicate things tactically, if he's going to mean you have to deviate from the way you've been playing, and a way of being playing that has taken England to 2 semi-finals back-to-back, having been in 2 in the previous 50 years. So, you can't say it's not working. Then, I think maybe you do leave out some exceptional players who are playing well in the Premier League, and Alexander-Arnold may be one of them. There's also the argument he could possibly play in midfield in extremis. So he's worth having in the squad as a sort of utility player. And the fact that Trippier can play on either side, James Justin can play on either side, although he didn't play brilliantly against Hungary. And so there are options there that you can sort of burgle 2 places through one player.
All right.
Jonathan, just a final one for me, and this is something that kind of came up to in my head because of Harry Kane reaching this milestone 50th goal for England the other night. I think he's only a few off Wayne Rooney's record now. We had one of our colleagues on Off the Ball, Nathan Murphy, describing during the week Gareth Bale as the greatest British footballer since Bobby Charlton, which got a mixed reception. A lot of people agreeing, a lot of people disagreeing and giving their own picks. Throwing you under the bus here and kind of bringing this one to you without prior warning. But if you had to pick a greatest British footballer of all time, or even since Bobby Charlton, would you go along the Gareth Bale lines or have another pick?
I think Kenny Dalglish should be pretty upset by that. If you want to say, is he the greatest since Dalglish? There's an argument for it. I mean, it's an impossible question, isn't it? What are you judging on? If you're judging it on international performances, then Kane has been exceptional for England. I mean, 50 goals at a far faster rate than Rooney or indeed Gary Lineker or Charlton is incredible. He's been a Golden Boot at the World Cup. He's been brilliant for England. He's been brilliant for Spurs, but it's Spurs. He hasn't been winning Champions Leagues in the way that Gareth Bale has. I don't know. I mean, the way Bale sort of has become a bit part player at Madrid, does that count against him? I don't know. I mean, these questions are very, very difficult to answer because it entirely depends what your terms are. I mean, if I can completely deflect and say, who's the greatest Argentinian player of all time? Is it the bloke who won the World Cup, but only won 2 league titles and 3 league titles in his entire career? Or is it the bloke who hasn't won a World Cup, but has won 13 league titles and 5 Champions Leagues? Argentinians would still say it's Maradona. So, it's very It entirely depends what your parameters are. Kane's been great. Bale's been great. Kenny Dalglish, I think, would probably like to be in that conversation as the greatest since Dalglish rather than the greatest since Charlton.
You would have Kenny up there with the two lads, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, okay.
I mean, yeah.
I only saw the very end of Kenny Dalglish, like the last couple of seasons, so I'm kind of unfamiliar with just how great he was.
I mean, won 3 European Cups with them, 6 league titles, 6 league titles, I think, as a player, maybe 5. His link up with Rush was, but I mean, Rush has got an argument there as well. I mean, Rush was I think we don't realise now how good Rush was, because part of the thing he did was his pressing, but in those days we didn't really talk about pressing. The way we consumed football in the early 80s was by highlights, and highlights obviously don't show you the forward chasing the fullback. So yeah, that front pairing, I think is arguably the greatest front pairing in English league history. So
right,
so yeah,
that's an even better conversation that you started for us this morning, Jonathan.
Yeah, sorry, I drifted off, but I mean, I kind of, the thing I always think about these conversations about who's the best, who's the greatest, is not actually what answer you come to. It's what is your method? What are you actually analysing there? And it's clearly not just about goals or trophies won or
emotion. It's all about emotion and love, isn't it? That's ultimately what did you enjoy more, Maradona in 86 or Messi's career? And then for a lot of people who saw Maradona, it's going to be Maradona forever, because that's the thing that made them fall in love with football.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of that, and it's also about narrative, and it's about sort of which one most conform. Yeah, I think one of the things that almost counts against Messi is it seems so easy for him, and I'm sure it's not. But Maradona, you could see the struggle, and I think we like to think about geniuses as being these tortured figures who have to sort of personally suffer for their talent. Whereas Messi just seems to drift along, being brilliant every week. I mean, maybe less so at PSG, but in his Barcelona days, yeah, he seems entirely unruffled.
Yeah,
which almost suggests, in football terms, he's a greater genius because he doesn't have that offset. But in terms of idea of what makes a story, what's a story we want to tell, Maradona fits that far more because of the enormous cost that his genius brought on him.
For sure, and also the fact that the defenders could break his ankle at any time, and did on a couple of occasions. Jonathan, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
It's Jonathan Wilson giving us his thoughts there this morning. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio for you today. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock is Barry Ryan talking about his book The Ascent. Leaders' Questions at 3 o'clock with Stuart Lancaster. Our retro panel is Gambling and Addiction. At 4, Michael Conlon talking about his Olympic Games after Rio is OTB Gold at 6. And the show is live tonight with Nathan and John Giles for Thursday Night Football. You can follow Off the Ball across all our social channels. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to download the OTB Sports app for the latest and the best sports content and analysis. We're back after these with Dion Fanning for more reaction to Ireland's defeat against Ukraine. First, here's Stewie Byrne talking to us in the aftermath last night, lamenting the national side's current mentality.
In the overall scheme of things, realistically, and if Stephen is genuinely, and I do believe he is, trying to change the culture of Irish football, trying to get us. He has to be brave, and he has to try and get it into the heads of these players that we're maxed out at the moment unless we start trying to have it, unless the players start trying to change their philosophy on the game. Just look at the Ukrainians. They're not physically taller than us. They're not physically bigger than us. They just think differently.
And they did very few things which took your breath away or were outstanding or beyond the reaches of Irish players. But in all the tiny little moments, the tiny little decisions, the little breakaways where Ukraine take the right option and Ireland take the wrong option, the misplaced passes, which became a factor for Ireland, especially in the second half. In all those tiny little moments, Ukraine are simply more efficient. They're not more outstanding. They're not more glamorous. They're just doing simpler things better.
Do you know what it was, Joe? And I've seen it in the Serbians as well. Okay, and I think Serbia are probably the best team we've played in this ground for probably 4 or 5 years. No doubt about it.
I remember you raving about them.
They have an inner confidence.
Yeah,
they just have it in them. It's just that they're born from kids, and their mother and dad basically say, "You're dead. You're brilliant.
Yeah,
you're brilliant.
Yeah,
like, you are going to be the best of the." And they just have this inner confidence in them. and they step onto the pitch and their chest is out and they just have it in their head, no one's going to get the better of me today and I'm going to do my stuff. And I'm not trying to say we don't have that.
Yeah.
But these teams, and when I talk about these teams, I'm talking about the teams that are above us. They just have this inner confidence that I'd love to know what if it was in a bottle, it'd be worth a fortune.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
I am a little bit of a pessimist, and
you are. But we know that.
But that's my job. You're supposed to bring the positivity here.
Munster legends Alan Quillan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews, and so much more.
I told you, when you're famous, you just got to be, you've got to be ready for these kind of tweets.
The Red 78 with Alan Quillan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, 15 minutes past 9 this morning. Time to go back to the Republic of Ireland's 1-0 defeat against Ukraine last night. Dion Fanning is with us. Dion, good morning to you.
Hi Ger, how are you?
What's going on? What is happening to us? Why is this happening to us? Why are we stuck in Groundhog Day?
How long have we got?
I don't know. Forever, it seems like.
If we're stuck in Groundhog Day, I suppose we have got forever. I think there are, look, the problem with the Ireland team, or the problem with discussing the Ireland team, is you do tend to go over all the same ground. And when you have a manager like Stephen Kenny who is trying to do something different, it makes it there is another line of attack, if you like, in terms of like, are we doing something that we're just simply not good enough to do? And when you have results like Saturday and when you have results like last night, it gets exhausting trying to kind of make a case or to kind of believe in what Stephen Kenny's saying when he talks about we're working towards a plan or a progressive plan or anything like that, when the evidence on a night like that is very hard to glimpse that. It's very hard to say, right, there's any real sign. Against that, Ireland had come into it with some evidence that things were actually going, were moving forward. And I think there is some, there has been glimpses of what Stephen Kenny wants to do. I don't know if Stephen Kenny will be the person to actually get Ireland to that position, but I think whoever is the manager, whether it's Stephen Kenny or somebody else, the approach in general has to be along these lines, because I did see people saying they would rather watch Ireland under Stephen Kenny even on a night like that rather than some of the previous managers' performances. I'm not sure. I felt the same watching it last night, but in general that's something I would subscribe to. But I don't think you could make much of a case last night that it was entertainment or there was something progressive happening. And I think the same is true of Armenia. They're two very disappointing results with performances that have lacked a real purpose and a real sense that the team knew what they're doing. I think to say that Ireland started well, everybody starts, like lots of teams start well. It's kind of, it's when you move beyond that initial 5, 10, 15 minute spell of kind of adrenaline and energy that you actually often get to see what really a team is, what their plans are based on. And again, last night, there wasn't a lot.
That's the problem, really, is that we all were like, oh, Kenny needs time to implement something. It's a significant enough deviation from where we've been for a long time, and we're going to have to judge him when he has had a run of games, everybody's available for him, and it's the start of something new. There's no pressure on, and that was these games. That's this run of games where it's like, judge me on this. I have high expectations. I think we can win this group is the message that he sent out there into the universe. And So we do have to judge him on these performances, and the performances are really bad.
They have been really bad, yeah. And he did, I think that's all reasonable. I think it's, if you go into it expecting or talking up, and I think Stephen Kenny had no option but really to talk it up, because he's sort of trapped between the past and the future, if you like, because, you know, we saw how badly he reacted to kind of people bringing up the previous Nations League, which was a legitimate avenue for people to bring up. But it's then you really can stress the present, and I think there was enough in an awful lot of the games to get people excited. You know, since then, but you have to kind of talk up the future, and then when the future arrives, it's not as promising or as exciting as we've been led to believe. So it is going to be disappointing. It is going to be. I don't think there's any. I think talking about Stephen Kenny in terms of, you know, is he the right man for the job at this point, there's no point to that. I think he is the manager. And I think that's the right thing to do. I think you have to be. I don't think there's any solution out there that would justify getting rid of him. That's the thing. I think you as I said, I think whether it's Stephen Kenny or somebody else, I think this is the way Irish football should be going. I think they need to be planning for something like this, and for planning for who is going to be the next manager after Stephen Kenny, after the European qualifiers, or ideally after a qualification. But that needs to be part of the plan. And I think moving, like kind of getting, you know, having some knee-jerk reaction and saying, right, let's get in Sam Allardyce or whoever to get some results, that's not really going to change the mood. And I think Stephen Kenny has done enough in previous games, and it may happen again against Scotland, that, you know, there's been enough for people to feel, right, we're enjoying this in a way that we haven't enjoyed Irish football matches for a long time. Because, you know, this does, the run of disappointing results does predate Stephen Kenny too, and the run of watching Ireland and watching Ireland play in kind of grim. If you'd offered me that beforehand, I'd have bitten your hand off style football matches. You know, that was, I would say, a lot worse, and had no long-term plan, except, and again, you could argue if this is the right way or the wrong way, but I would say that was the wrong way. It had no long-term plan except let's scrape a result, whatever way it is, and move on. Whereas Stephen Kenny, at his best, is looking to do something a lot more than that. I would say that the last two performances, it's been hard to glimpse what that is, and that is the problem.
Dion, if you assume that Stephen is for the moment safe in the job, and look, anecdotally at matches and online, certainly you hear a lot of people saying, you know, maybe he needs to change the tactics, change the system. Look, that's a difficult question to answer, because as Ger said earlier, it's difficult to know what the alternative to the system is. But I mean, looking at it from your own point of view at the minute, do you stick or twist with this tactical thing? Is it too far gone, or can he turn around now and kind of maybe try something else?
I think he can always try something else. I think you know, we saw last night the difference. I do think ultimately a lot of it, there are tactical variations that he can do, but ultimately the problem for Ireland does come down to, again, the same, and this is when you come back to how long have you got, it comes down to the players we have. Now, you saw the difference Jason Knight made yesterday compared to not being in the team against Armenia, and that would seem to have been a mistake not to play him, looking at how he played in previous games as well. You know, when you think of you know, just the impact Knight has made since he's been involved is significant. So that seemed like, I don't think we have enough quality players to kind of Whether he was pacing and whether he was thinking we have a lot of matches, I don't know. But I think he's a player that makes a difference. So ultimately, the tactical differences, obviously, midfield being overrun is something that is an issue, and that is something that needs to be addressed. But equally, who is going to actually do that in a way that is really, that makes a significant difference to the tactics, and that is the problem. I think that is Ireland's problem. And if you look at, say, Ukraine's game against Wales, you look at Jack Grealish even playing for England. The minute those words are coming out of my mouth, why did I say that? But you look at the difference one player makes, and I think, again, we can talk an awful lot about what Stephen Kenny is trying to do, and I think it is the right thing he's trying to do, but the absence of star quality in the Ireland team is as much as anything else the difference between between good results and bad results.
Like, we had star quality on the sideline as well not too long ago, Dion, in Anthony Barry, who we touched on at the start of the show this morning as well. Like, we're looking on with envy now at Belgium, who've managed to nab him from us, and as we mentioned earlier, they won 6-1 against Poland last night. Like, is it too facetious to maybe look at Anthony Barry's exit and the results that have happened since as coincidental, or is there something there?
I think to look at Belgium's results and go, my God, what a genius Anthony Barry is a stretch. I think it really is a stretch. Like, look at the players Belgium have. I think that's the key thing, rather than saying, my God, he worked wonders with Ireland, and now he's working wonders with a Belgium team with De Bruyne. I'm looking at Hazard, Tielemans. There's it's not comparing like for like. I don't think we can put Belgium up, put Belgium in the kind of Anthony Barry, the pro Anthony Barry section. But I would say that clearly he had an idea. What you hear from people close to the Ireland team is that he was very, he was a significant presence, and he had significant ideas in terms of how Ireland were going to play. Equally, it wasn't like we're going back to for 3 years now since Ireland won a competitive match at home. That also encompasses the Anthony Barry era. So it's not as if we have just come out of a golden age. I think I think there are lots of reasons. It's possibly one factor, and I think in that strange dynamic that makes up football teams, coaches who players feel are actually delivering a message they like and they understand can make a huge difference. I'm not saying that that's not happening now, but clearly it was happening with Barry. But I also feel like it is conceivable that in the game against Scotland, having experienced these two bad results, I think there's something in, like, the Ireland team is still such a fragile kind of thing that it's likely to kind of, there's every chance you get some kind of response, some kind of heroic 1-1 against Scotland is on the cards. And again, you go back to some of these matches, you go back to the Serbia game where we had a heroic 1-1. Bazunu was really the difference, was the player who kept us in it.
If you're in the camp, right, and you're thinking about the draw is going to be in October, we're going to be in the third pot, so it's going to be tricky. Top two teams automatically qualify, and there's still some hope for those teams who finished third in their group by way of playoff. So it's not dead. It's still possible that we can go to the Euros, even though the campaign hasn't even started. The draw hasn't been made.
So
it's not dead.
Sure, you're like it's like Rob Shepherd with Graham Taylor and The Impossible Job. Like you're really bringing pessimism to a new level. The draw hasn't even happened, and you're saying we're not out of it yet.
Exactly. But the one thing that you might be hopeful about is that perhaps by that stage, Bazunu will be playing week in, week out for Southampton. That would be big. So he's your number one. And then a few other players are playing week in, week out football, ideally in the Championship and some of them in the Premier League. And maybe Obafemi needs to be in the starting lineup. I don't know. Is there enough in the personnel that are missing, Adam Ida, Andrew Omavamadeli, that you can say when the heat comes on in the qualifiers that the team will look a little bit different, and that this stuff is ultimately still, while it's a replacement for friendlies and there is something good on offer at the end of it, these are still friendlies, and so we should maybe rein in the pessimism a bit.
Well, again, that comes back to how the tournament was talked up. I don't think there's any huge enthusiasm for the Nations League. I think somebody was trying to persuade me that we wouldn't miss the World Cup in June because we'd have the Nations League, and I think that's clearly not the case. It isn't something that people get very excited by. It's a bit like the FA Cup, though, in that it's a tournament that actually can be used for to kind of drive a case against, or to shape a case against a team or a manager, and whilst getting kind of reasonable or average results are not going to excite very many people. Losing as has been happening with Ireland is going to kind of make it harder for Stephen Kenny, and I think that is the case. So I do think Ireland, a result against Scotland, a victory against Scotland would be quite important for him at this stage. Ultimately, you're right. Like when people will be more engaged by the qualifiers. We will go into it with the that borderline pessimism, optimism that you lay out, and there are many opportunities to qualify for it, as you said. Ireland missed out through a playoff the last time. It is a competition now that even teams where Ireland are, and I think this is one of the things that has been dawning on people very slowly, is just how far Ireland have fallen. So when we say, you shouldn't lose to Armenia, shouldn't lose to Luxembourg, shouldn't lose to a Ukrainian side that's made 10 changes and has just lost out in a game that was far more important to them. You keep coming up against, well, why shouldn't we? What have Ireland got? What is Ireland? What have Ireland got to be so certain that they actually should be getting these results? And you look through you look through what we have, and it's very hard to make any case. Now, when you talk about players playing regularly, playing in the Championship, that will all make a difference. I don't think that stuff really, like Bazunu hasn't. I think Bazunu playing in the Premier League would be great for him. I don't think that stuff ultimately matters that much in international football. I think it's you can, as Ukraine have kind of demonstrated, because everyone was like, well, Ukraine are before their World Cup, people felt that they would really, against Scotland, it was like, oh, they'll struggle because they've been playing. Like, there are factors outside the kind of cut and thrust of club football that make a difference for international football. So I wouldn't bet a lot on kind of, right, we've got players playing in the Championship. I think it's about what Stephen Kenny does with the players when he gets them together. And that's why Ireland, it's actually a reason why Ireland should feel some kind of optimism, because there is nobody in international football really to fear. But equally, when it doesn't happen, the questions are really best addressed to the manager and to within the camp, rather than saying, there's been a long gap between the end of the Championship and these games, or the players aren't playing at a higher level. Ultimately, international football isn't really about those things. It's about what you can get a bunch of average players to do against usually another bunch of average players.
I think your point about the FA Cup being used as a stick to beat managers with at certain times is very apt, because what happens if the results in the next two games aren't significantly better is that almost from the start of the qualifying campaign, every match is a little bit of a referendum, to the point where if it becomes clear we're not going to qualify, or if there's a disaster along the way, then the calls and the clamour for him to go will be very difficult to ignore. So that's why these games are very, very big games. It's like just to buy a bit of calm and buy a bit of peace and try and change the mood music around at the moment, because, you know, by talking up this competition, everybody is saying, okay, this is your team now, let's see what you've got. And at the moment the signs are really bad. So there's a lot riding on the team selection for the weekend against Scotland. Is there anything in the current group that you would do to change, apart from, I mean, I don't know, like, is there start Obafemi? Does that make a difference?
I think it would. I think it could make a difference. You know, it's worth a shot. I think, you know, like Jason Knight obviously made a difference, and hopefully he will start again. I think, you know, there are, you know, the injuries, the absences are going to be a problem for Ireland at this stage. Scotland aren't very good. Like, that is, you know, and it is going to be. I think we might be. Anyone who's seen Scotland play would kind of come away from it kind of thinking, God, Scotland really are a poor side. But I think at the same time, we might again come face to face with our own limitations when we play them. I just go back to that point about whether I guess you're like that these, you know, a couple of bad results will add to the pressure. I would like to think that there is now some sense that there's not much, it's pretty fatalistic, but, you know, there is not much point in getting rid of Stephen Kenny, no matter what happens. Like, you know, he's going to go into the European Championship, he's going to go into the qualifiers. At that stage, you may as well allow him to continue for the duration of them, because, again, unless there is some outstanding alternative, I don't see what the point of doing that is, because, you know, what are we harking back to? This is it's a kind of negative argument in favour of Stephen Kenny, but it's the only one you can really make after a couple of results like this. But what are we harking back to? Like the second Mick McCarthy era. Is that the golden age? You know, there isn't a lot really
where the team is so bad that they get hammered in every game and they eventually do qualify for a tournament. You know, like, I agree with you. Really, fundamentally, it's just that very difficult to make any case other than the same story.
Other than it could be a lot. You know, it's a bit like. You know, it's like the Fawlty Towers, like Major in the Fawlty Towers. No, when they say this is the worst hotel they've ever stayed in, and he says, no, there's a place in Bournemouth, or whatever the line is. Like, it's a bit like that. Like, there is a worse version. There is a worse version of this Ireland team. There is a parallel universe.
Yeah, it's Northern Ireland.
Well, there's a parallel universe where things are a lot worse, and that's the
Hooray!
best. on a day like today, that's the best case you can make.
Shane, you'd one more. We've time for one more.
Yeah, no, just thinking, Dion. Like, I know hindsight's obviously 20/20, but we were talking earlier about, you know, the fact that I guess Stephen Kenny at the start of the Nations League started talking about the fact that the ambition was to go on and win this group, and you can look back now and say, you know, did he make the right decision in saying that? Is it, you know, a positive thing to have great ambitions and lofty ambitions for this Irish team? Or was that setting the bar maybe a little bit too high, and expectations maybe for the fans and the media at least a little bit too high?
Again, I think he didn't have, given the way things had gone, he probably had to do something like that. I think having ambition is something that is a part of Stephen Kenny's makeup. You know, whatever job he's done, I think that's something, and I think that's something we want from an Ireland manager, because the alternative is, you know, the trap. Like, we don't have the players. reductionist view that once we don't have the players, we can never actually aspire to do anything. Like my argument would be that we don't have the players, but there aren't a lot of countries that do have the players. So we can actually aspire to try and do something, as Stephen Kenny's teams have done at their best, that actually excite people and make you think that something good is coming. I feel that given where he started, given how Ireland had kind of transitioned out of that into something encouraging, he had to kind of maybe talk it up. And I think it's a genuine feeling with him too. I think he does believe that, and I think that's a noble thing and a worthwhile thing to have. But equally now, on the back of the last two results, you could say, "Oh God, why didn't he talk us down?" I'm not sure if Ireland had lost to Armenia and then Ukraine. I think no matter what, people would be complaining or would be rightly annoyed about it. And if Stephen Kenny had come into them saying, "Look, we don't have the players. We're going to do our best. Hopefully, we come away from these games with something," people wouldn't necessarily go, "Well, fair play to him. He knows that we're not up to much." They'd want something more. So I think it's the right thing. I think it's the only thing he could do. And I do, as I say, I think it is actually what he believes, which is the most important thing. But there does need now to be some evidence or something for people to grasp hold of. And I just think it hasn't been there. One of the things that's characterized a lot of the matches, even the ones that have been a little bit disappointing under Kenny, has been that kind of sense of, okay, we're behind this team and we're still, the supporters are really kind of pro what Stephen Kenny is trying to do. I think there needed to be something last night to kind of keep that sense of optimism or hopefulness going, and it wasn't there.
Yeah. Hopefully it happens at the weekend. Dion, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, lads.
It's Dion Fanning there. You can read his work in The Currency. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. You can follow Dion on Twitter, of course, as well. So I don't know how you feel at the end of that, Shane. Do you feel better that you got it all off your chest, or are you more depressed?
I'm slightly more depressed, but Scotland awaits on Saturday.
Glad to be of service.
3-0 win. Ever the optimism.
Mark says senior players letting the team down big time. Hendrick, Miles off it in the last two games. Collins, Obafemi and Knight, all really impressive players. We can't keep playing players that aren't doing the job against smaller teams. OTB Kenny fan club hack spoofing nonsense to cover for inept manager, says Con Chronic. That's like a word soup of abuse.
They've got them all in there.
If he managed any other team, he'd be sacked by now. He's not won even one meaningful competitive match. Stephen G says, didn't Bielsa make Leeds Championship players much better, though, versus the argument that we simply don't have the players? It's always a different job where you can inject the team with energy. Why was Roy Keane not offered the job, asks Mike. Sonny Irish says, start from scratch, employ coaches at grassroots levels with UEFA badges, put money into the League of Ireland, start supporting Irish teams instead of the slavish EPL obsession. I mean, look, we could have that conversation today, but everybody accuses of, you're ignoring the thing. And it's like, actually, no, the structural issues are the most important stuff, and we keep getting away from the structural issues because we get distracted by everything else. But ultimately, football in Ireland has been mismanaged for decades, and they need to get their house in order. And let's see if the current board are any better than the previous boards, and if they're actually able to do what they're supposed to be doing, we will see. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish today. Shane, good stuff. Thanks a million for that. Tomorrow is Adrian and Owen back from his jollies. We'll be joined live in studio with the now departed Meath manager, Andy McEntee, departed from the Meath job as opposed to this mortal coil. Plus, we'll have rugby chat with Alan Quinlan ahead of the URC semi-finals. Karen Duggan will be on to talk about football. Right now, here's the rest of Stewie Byrne reflecting on last night's disappointment in Dublin. Enjoy.
So the Republic of Ireland's long wait for a victory or even a goal in the Nations League goes on, beaten 1-0 by Ukraine here at the Aviva Stadium. I feel like we've had this conversation too many times over the Stephen Kenny reign and over the last 4 or 5 years of Irish football. Ireland started well, good 15 minutes, threw everything at them in the last 10 minutes, but for a good hour of that game, technically were miles off it. Why were Ukraine's second string team so much better than Ireland?
Yeah, I think second string is being a bit harsh.
Well,
I know
they changed 10 players from the team that were brilliant against Wales.
But you'd have to admit they were 10 excellent players. You know, they were a very good side, Ukraine. I think, you know, I'm coming away from this, Nathan. It's disappointing. It wouldn't have been as disappointing if Saturday hadn't have been so poor. But that's the reality of it. You know, we put ourselves in a bit of a situation where we haven't really done our stuff over 2 games. But tonight's game, I'm reminded of the time when I played myself and you know, very lucky to have played, you know, in European games against, you know, clubs from Romania, Ukraine, Russia, you know, Europe, and always came away from the games thinking, how do these guys get to the level that they're at? You know, because in the modern game, you know, I'm just saying this to Joe earlier, you know, we're all, you know, reading from the same, you know, coaching books, same physical conditioning. There's no difference anywhere. The difference is, it's in the players and in their mentality and in their culture. Okay. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get that overnight. Okay.
It's in their quality.
Yeah, it's in their quality. Yeah, but they're from that size up, Nathan. They just are taught differently. You know, whether they're told from that you're brilliant, you're going to be the best player in the world, and they believe it. But I seen it myself as a player when I played against these kind of quality teams. You look at the Serbia game here. These guys they just have this inner confidence in them, and we're now at a stage where this philosophy of trying to play football and trying to be a little bit more positive and be less direct and so on, it's come to, you know, it isn't going to progress much further. I don't think we can certainly try and maintain that, but we're not going to get any better until there's a cultural change within how the players think, Nathan.
But has Stephen Kenny sold us all a pup? Because he came in and said, I'm never going to say the players aren't good enough. That, you know, he didn't like watching Jack Charlton in Italia 90. He wanted Ireland playing a modern, progressive style of football.
Yeah, which he's
Where is it?
Yeah, but we have to look at it. You know, we have to look at this objectively. Okay. It's his job as a manager to come in, try and get us playing a good style of football and try and get inside the heads of these players and get them going. And I think he's done that to a point. But it's going to stagnate unless we change our mindset as players. You know, you look at the Ukrainians tonight; they're able to just glide across the pitch.
They're able the manager's job.
He's not going to do it. You're not going to do it. He'll only be able to do so much with this group of players. He'd be able to try and he might be able to talk to them.
Then we're back in 10 years' time when we've had a complete rethink of. There's a new director of football coming in at the end.
No. It's not. No. We don't need you don't need a new director of football. You don't need anything. We need players that are coming through to start thinking differently. And you know, look at these players. They're all coming from cities in Ukraine. They're not sort of first world rich cities. They're all working class cities. Same in you know, if I had played against Steaua Bucharest, Romania is a poor country. I've been in parts of Russia which were kips. But these guys they just play football a different way. They just think differently about the game. They have an awareness. They have a swagger about them. You know, they just have this.
They're just better footballers.
They're better football. Yeah, but that's what makes
we look out there. Like,
that's what makes them better footballers. They think differently. That's what makes them better footballers. They think differently. But they think I'm better than you.
But I'm better than you. But what I'm asking is that Stephen Kenny, when he came in, and we could sit here and say, and it's very easy to look at those two groups of players, and yes, it was the second string Ukraine side, but their two centre midfielders play for Dynamo Kiev, vastly experienced internationals, play Champions League football, Europa League football, played at a very high level against the best players all of the time. Remember, they got to the quarterfinals of the European Championships 8-9 months ago. So they're a good quality side. But Stephen Kenny made a point constantly when he was coming into this job of saying, I will not question the players. I will not hear anyone say we don't have players that are good enough. You look at that, and what you're basically saying is we don't have players who are good enough to compete at that level.
I think he can get another tune out of these players. I do. a genuine thing. Or I think any manager can get, that thinks differently about the game can certainly do that. But I think these players have more in them to give. I think we have to get this, and I thought it was working. I thought we were getting to a stage where we have to get this. I don't know how to articulate this sort of frenetic kind of back to front style of play out of our heads. We have to. There's a mindset to these players. There's a quality about them. There's a calmness about them. There's a football intelligence there that sort of they exude confidence. You know,
is that the most worrying part from an Irish point of view? It feels in these last couple of games as if they've fallen back into old habits. There were definitely signs over the last year on Stephen Kenny of trying to play football.
I think that's a fair point, Nathan.
Whereas you said, we've seen that performance for 10 years where Ireland come out at start, it's 100 miles an hour. Jason Knight is everywhere. There's a real energy to the crowd, to the performance, and then we throw everything at them in the last 10 minutes. But actually, the control, the possession-based football, the pick and right pass, the centre halves doing something different. They seem to have gone away. I think it's fair. Again.
I think it's a fair point. I think that is definitely a fair point. Certainly, in the Armenia game, we looked a little bit bereft of ideas. There was an impatience about our play, and that's probably a key takeaway word. Impatience. Impatience comes into our game, and we don't keep doing the same things that we know will work, the same thing, try and maintain that certain level of calmness and good play and possession. We've sort of stepped away a little bit from that now. So that's his big job, is to kind of, between now and Scotland, is to try and calm them down and get us back playing, get us back on the road again, because these 4 games are in danger of being an absolute disaster. And the Armenian game is the game that has put us right in the
much like Luxembourg, and we stood in this exact same position. I remember after Luxembourg, and both sort of felt that it's going to be very, very hard to turn this around, and they sort of managed to grind it out.
They did. They did turn it around.
Yeah. But even still, there was a sense of the Luxembourg game hung over it, and likewise with Armenia. But they've just lost to Armenia 4 days ago. He's made 2 changes, 1 enforced change. Were you surprised with the selection? Is he getting his team selection right?
To be quite honest, I probably would have went with the pretty much the same team. I just think that we've somewhere along the way we've veered a little bit off the road. We've kind of gone a little bit off road, and we're a little bit out of control. And
where does that come from? Because we can't just say it's gone off road, but from the positivity that was there from, was it 1 defeat in 11, and that was the Portugal game, and Cristiano Ronaldo and all that, and winning 3-0 away from home at Luxembourg and Azerbaijan, albeit not the greatest countries in the world, playing well at times against Belgium, beating Lithuania in the friendly, the positivity, the bit of control. What's happened in the space of 2-3 months that suddenly they found themselves going away from the good stuff?
I don't know. That's Stephen Kenny's job to figure out. I think if you're in the group, you'll certainly be able to figure some things out, but maybe it's the fact that we haven't been together for 3 months, and people will talk about the the fact that it's at the end of a season and all this kind of stuff. I don't buy into that. I think the last 2 games we've kind of taken a little bit of a step backwards. We've gone back to a little bit, as you suggested, a little bit like the way it was when he first took over. It's a bit impatient, and it's a bit frenetic and bad decision making, and there's a lack of calmness about our play, and a lack of belief in how we want to play. All that's kind of gone a little bit away from us. So it's just a case of getting the group together, and I really think he I hate saying he needs a big performance on Saturday, but he needs to work with these players mentally between now and then and say, you've got to give me more. We have to be calmer on the ball. We have to be braver. We have to be a little bit sharper. A little bit sharper over 5-10 yards. All that kind of stuff. It's all the stereotypical stuff that I'm saying, but it's very much a psychological thing as it is anything else. And
he's under a bit of pressure now. He has the new contract in his back pocket.
He'll always be under pressure. Look,
he'll have he'll have a bit of a honeymoon period now where he can get through the Nations League, get a couple of results, but suddenly, as you say, Armenia means that dominates everything. If they don't get a result against Scotland, you're away to Ukraine. It's hard to see. Ukraine will probably be back to full strength then over in Poland. Like, you lose your 4 Nations League games, you're going into the qualifiers just massively on the back foot, and the negativity. And
it is what it is, Nathan. I want to see a cultural change in the game in this country, and whether it's under the helm of Stephen Kenny or someone else, I don't really mind, to be quite honest with you. I just don't want to. But
I think everyone wants that.
Yeah,
and,
I do.
And I want that. But the question, and the people watching this will say,
fine. Yeah.
It's senior international football. It's big boy stuff. It's about results. You got to win matches.
Yeah, and if he doesn't win matches, he won't lose his job. He knows that. Everyone knows that. It's as simple as that. It's just, what can he do tomorrow that's going to change how we play on Saturday? And I think maybe we have to. Maybe he has to get them in, have a chat about it, try and have a kind of a broad conversation about what it's all about. And maybe, I've no doubt they'll watch the games again, and maybe you say, have a look at the Ukrainians. Why can't we do that? Why can't we play like that? Why can't we? Where are we falling down? You can have an open conversation with players about that and get the players' point of view. But this is all, whether it changes or not, it's up to the players.
There'll be obviously questions about systems and change of systems, though. Both Armenia and Ukraine played 3 at the back against the Republic of Ireland, and it worked just fine for them. A lot was put on Anthony Barry and how good he was as a coach. He's not there. Do you think that this is a factor in what's gone on over the last couple of games, his influence being missed?
I don't know, Nathan, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm if you do, Anthony Barry came in as his first choice when he got the job, and I suppose when you do lose someone that is supposed to have a very good reputation as a coach, it can be a loss. But sure, look at Belgium, they're in rag order as well, to be quite honest with you. Well, they are. They got hammered thumped 4-0 by the Netherlands, so I don't really buy into that. I really do think that the focus has to be on this sort of.
It's hard, like what you're talking about, that
this calmness and confidence.
Geez, that's a hard thing to get when you've just lost 2 games like that. Like
it is.
It's 10 times harder than when you're on.
Confidence is a huge thing, Nathan. And you're quite right. Maybe the only thing he needs to do now is try and get the confidence back up again. I don't think you're going to stop.
What about changes? Anyone there that came on? Like Obafemi? Do you start Obafemi now on Saturday?
Probably Obafemi's probably worth starting now. Colin Robinson looks now to me to be he's hit a little bit of a wall personally. He looks, his decision making isn't right, and he's casting a frustration figure at the moment. So I think Obafemi's certainly come in. He's given the manager food for thought. I'm not a huge believer in changing it too much, because don't forget it's the. There's a core group of players that have sort of led this change, but people's memories, people losing memories very quick, and very soon people are going to go change. What change? Because it doesn't seem to be changing too much. So we need to kind of, as I said, we veered a little bit off the road here, and we need to get back on the motorway again, I suppose.
We better leave before the lights go off.
Better leave from Wayne and just go out the door.
Will we ever see a competitive win for the Republic of Ireland, Stewie?
I'm sure we will. Yeah. We'll be both here in our 60s or 70s and having a glass of wine.
We'll back here on Saturday. Maybe we'll get it then.
Back here on Saturday. We
back here on Saturday. Ireland, Scotland live, 5 o'clock off the ball. See you then.
OTB
AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
We just wanted to